Hello and thank you for joining for tonight's stories. I hope you enjoy. The Black River Wendigo. The envelope wasn't there when I locked the door last night. Now it lay on the floor, yellowed and warped, as if it had been waiting decades for me to find it. My name, Tristan Durham, was scrawled across the front in ink so faded it looked like old blood. I slit it open with my pocket knife, the paper brittle as dried leaves. Inside, pages torn from a journal, the handwriting frantic, slanting off the edges. October 17, 1923, Black River Woods. It wasn't a bear. It stood too tall, moved too wrong. And God help me, it spoke in my brother's voice. My fingers left smudges on the paper. The ink smelled faintly of mildew and something metallic. Lena leaned over my shoulder, her breath sharp with morning coffee. Another crackpot sending you their grandpa's ghost story. Her tone was light, but her fingers twitched toward the audio recorder slung around her neck. I flattened the last page, a sketch crude but precise. A skeletal figure, limbs stretched too long, mouth gaping wide enough to swallow a man whole. The artist had scribbled Wendigo beneath it, the letters dug deep into the paper. Javier would have laughed if he'd seen it, called it another tourist trap. But Javier wasn't here. Just the envelope, the journal, and the coordinates inked beside the sketch, numbers wobbling like the writer's hand had been shaking. Priya's voice crackled through the walkie on my desk. Thermal gears packed. You two coming or what? The journal pages trembled in my grip. The ink wasn't just faded, it was burned in places, as if someone had held a match too close to the words they couldn't bear to finish. Lena's fingers hovered over the sketch. Look at the tree lines here, she murmured. Too precise for a hoax. Whoever drew this saw it. The creature's elongated limbs twisted unnaturally around the pine trunks, its fingers hooked like sickles. The artist had shaded the hollows of its ribs with such care that I could almost hear the rasp of its breath. Outside, the wind howled against the office window, a sound too much like laughter. Javier would have called it coincidence, but Javier wasn't here to say it. Just the three of us, the journal, and the creeping certainty that those coordinates led somewhere we shouldn't go. Priya kicked open the door, her arms laden with gear. Found something else, she said, tossing a newspaper clipping onto the desk. Black River hunting party vanishes, 1923. The headline screamed above a grainy photo of four men, their faces blurred by time. One gripped a rifle with white-knuckled hands. The caption read, "Only survivor claims something spoke in the trees." Lena's recorder clicked on. "Tell me you're not considering this." Her voice wavered, the first crack in her usual skepticism. The journal pages rustled like dry leaves in a grave. I traced the coordinates again. The numbers bled into my skin. Priya met my gaze, her dark eyes unreadable. "Thermal picks up heat signatures," she said softly. "But cold, that's harder to see." The walkie hissed static. For a moment I thought I heard whispers in the white noise, my name tangled with Javier S. Then silence. Lena's hand closed over mine. "We'll need silver," she said. Her palm was ice cold. Outside, the wind shrieked again. This time it almost sounded like words. Priya unzipped a black duffel. Inside, folded neatly atop the thermal gear, lay a rusted machete, its blade notched from use, its hilt wrapped in frayed leather. "Found it in Javier's locker," she said. The silence that followed was thicker than the dust motes swirling in the dim office light. I turned the journal page. The next entry was smeared with something dark, old ink or something worse. "It watches from the trees, mimics voices. Tom swears he heard his wife calling him into the dark. Went after her. We found his coat draped over a branch empty." The handwriting dissolved into frantic scribbles. Beneath it, the artist had drawn the same gaunt figure, but now its ribs were fuller, its mouth wet with fresh strokes of ink. Lena's fingers tightened on my wrist. "That's not folklore," she whispered. Her pulse fluttered like a trapped moth against my skin. The sketch's hollow eyes seemed to follow me as I tilted the page toward the weak bulb overhead. Something about the way the creature's fingers curled, too many joints, knuckles swollen like knots on a diseased tree, made my throat tighten. Priya slammed the duffel shut. "We leave at dawn." Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered toward the window. The glass rattled in its frame. Outside, something scraped against the brick, a branch, or the slow drag of claws. The walkie crackled. Static hissed, then a voice, hoarse, broken, gasped a single word: "Tristan." Javier's voice. Lena recoiled, her recorder clattering to the floor. The walkie died. The silence that followed was worse than the scream I expected. Priya's hand hovered over the machete's hilt. Her fingers trembled. I reached for the journal again. The final page was blank, except for 2 words scrawled in that same desperate hand: "It learns." The office lights flickered. Outside, the scraping sound grew louder, closer. Priya didn't look at me when she spoke. "Pack the silver bullets," she said, "and the holy water." Her laugh was hollow. "Assuming any of that works." The wind moaned through the cracks in the old building. This time, it didn't sound like laughter at all. Priya's fingers drummed against the duffel bag, her nails bitten ragged. "We should burn it," she said suddenly, her gaze locked on the journal. "Right now, before we leave." Lena didn't argue at first. Her knuckles whitened around the recorder, its red light blinking like a wounded eye. I ran my thumb over the journal's last page. The paper crumbled at the edges, whispering against my skin. "It learns." The words prickled as if the ink itself were alive. Behind me, the office window rattled again, not wind. Something tapping, deliberate. Lena's breath hitched. "Don't look," she warned, but it was too late. The glass was fogged, streaked with grime, but the shape pressed against it was unmistakable. Elongated fingers, too many joints, the nails blackened and split. It dragged downward, leaving a wet trail that gleamed under the flickering bulb. Priya moved first. The machete flashed as she wrenched it free, its edge catching the light. "Silver S in the Jeep," she muttered. Her voice was steady, but her pupils had swallowed the brown of her irises. The tapping stopped. The silence was worse. Then the walkie hissed, a wet, choking static. Javier's voice again, but broken now, syllables stretched like taffy. "Tristan, you left me." The words dissolved into a gurgle, the sound of something drowning from the inside out. Lena slammed her palm down on the walkie, killing the transmission. Her lips moved soundlessly, shaping a name, Javier, but no sound came out. Outside, the scraping resumed, closer this time. The window creaked under the weight of something leaning against it. The glass bowed inward, a hairline crack splintering up the pane. The streetlight outside flickered, and for one heart-stopping second, the silhouette beyond the glass resolved into a hunched, grotesquely elongated shadow, head cocked at an impossible angle, ribs pressing against the glass like a starving animal. Priya's hand clamped around my wrist, her grip vice-tight. "We go out the back," she hissed. Now, Lena didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the window, her face bloodless. The glass groaned, the cracks spread. Then from the alley below, a sound that stopped my breath. A wet, rattling inhalation, the sound of something smelling us. The journal slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a sound like dry bones. Priya's lips peeled back from her teeth. "Run," she said. And the window shattered. Not in a spray of glass, but inward, slow, deliberate, as if pushed by something savoring the moment. The creature's arms slithered through the gap, gray skin stretched taut over jagged bones, fingers twitching like spiders testing a web. The stench hit us first, rotting meat and wet earth, the sour tang of something wrong. Lena screamed, not a sound of fear but of recognition, her own voice thrown back at her from the thing's lipless mouth. "Lena," it crooned, her tone perfectly mirrored. "Why won't you help me?" Priya didn't hesitate. The machete arced down, severing the wrist in one brutal stroke. Black fluid spurted, thick as tar, splattering the journal pages. The severed hand writhed on the floor, fingers curling toward Lena's boot. She kicked it away, her face a mask of revulsion. The thing outside howled, a sound that wasn't pain but laughter. The stump of its arm writhed, new fingers sprouting like fast-forwarded mold. The streetlight flickered again, and for a heartbeat we saw it fully. A nightmare of stretched sinew and hollow ribs, its jaw unhinging to reveal a throat lined with needle teeth. Priya grabbed Lena's arm, dragging her toward the back door. I snatched the journal, its pages now sticky with that black ichor. The ink bled, the words "it learned" swelling like a fresh wound. The alley behind the office was a throat of shadows. We sprinted, our boots slipping on wet pavement. Behind us, the thing loped, not running but flowing, its limbs bending where they shouldn't. The Jeep was 20 feet away, its headlights like a promise. Then Javier stepped into the light. Or what was left of him. His eyes were gone, replaced by pits of swirling darkness. His lips split in a grin too wide for his face. "Missed me," he rasped, his voice layered with something guttural alien. Priya raised the machete. Javier's head tilted, his neck cracking audibly. "Silver won't save you," he whispered, then lunged. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. I tasted blood, felt the journal tear in my grip as we hit the ground. Javier's weight was wrong, too light, like a sack of sticks. His fingers, cold as grave dirt, closed around my throat. Above us, the streetlight burst in a shower of sparks. In the dying light, I saw it, the Wendigo, perched on the roof of the Jeep, its elongated limbs folded like a praying mantis. It watched, head cocked, as Javier squeezed. Priya's machete flashed again. This time, it was Javier's blood that sprayed my face. Priya's blade cleaved through the thing's forearm, bone parted like dry kindling, but the fingers around my throat didn't loosen. They tightened, nails sinking into my flesh, pumping something thick and cold into my veins. I gagged, vision tunneling. Javier's face rippled, skin sloughing off in wet sheets to reveal the Wendigo's grinning skull beneath, its breath reeking of spoiled meat and winter graves. Lena's scream tore through the alley. She lunged, silver crucifix in hand, and jammed it into the creature's hollow eye socket. It shrieked, a sound like sheet metal tearing, and recoiled, limbs spasming. The fingers around my throat went slack, black fluid bubbling from the stump of its wrist. The Jeep's engine roared to life. Priya hauled me into the passenger seat, my legs tangling with the journal's scattered pages. Lena scrambled into the back, her hands slick with Javier's. No, not Javier's blackened blood. The Wendigo writhed on the pavement, its stolen skin melting like candle wax, but its head snapped up as Priya slammed the gas. The Jeep lurched forward. For a heartbeat, I thought we'd made it. Then the roof buckled. Talons punched through the metal, shredding the canvas top like wet paper. Lena screamed again, fumbling for the holy water, but the thing didn't drop inside. It pressed its face against the windshield, elongated jaw unhinging, and sang in Lena's voice, "You can't outrun hunger." Priya swerved, tires screeching. The Wendigo clung on, its skeletal fingers curling around the doorframe. The rearview mirror reflected its eyes, pupils dilated into black voids, drinking in our terror. I grabbed the machete. The blade bit deep into its wrist. It didn't bleed, it laughed. Then the radio crackled to life, spewing static and Javier's voice, no, the thing wearing his voice whispering, "Tristan, you'll taste so sweet when the cold comes." Lena hurled the holy water. The windshield erupted in steam, the Wendigo's flesh sizzling like fat in a pan. It reeled back, shrieking. And then we were free, the Jeep careening into the night, its headlights carving a frail path through the dark. In the rearview mirror, the Wendigo stood motionless in the road, its head cocked, watching. Waiting. Priya's knuckles were white on the wheel. "It's not done with us," she breathed. The journal lay at my feet, its pages glistening with black ichor. The words "it learns" had bled into a new sentence. "It remembers." The Jeep's headlights flickered as we hit the county line, the trees crowding closer, their branches clawing at the windows like bony fingers. Lena hyperventilated in the backseat, her hands pressed to her ears, whether to block out the Wendigo's whispers or the memory of Javier's hollowed-out face. I couldn't tell. Priya drove with mechanical precision, her jaw clenched so tight I could hear her teeth grinding. The journal's pages rustled at my feet, though there was no wind. The ink had mutated further, the words now writhing like maggots. It knows your scent. It knows your fear. The stench of the Wendigo's black blood clung to my clothes, acrid and sweet, like rotting fruit left too long in the sun. A mile marker flashed past Black River 12 me. Priya's grip on the wheel faltered. "We're going in circles," she muttered. The GPS screen fizzed with static, the map replaced by a single pulsing dot. Our destination, the coordinates from the journal. The same spot where the 1923 hunting party vanished. Lena's breath hitched. "Did you hear that?" Her voice was raw, barely audible over the engine. I hadn't, but then it came, a child's laughter, tinny and distant, threading through the radio static. A voice followed, small and pleading. "Mommy, I'm cold." Lena's entire body locked up. Her daughter's voice. Her daughter who'd been dead 6 years. Priya killed the radio with a savage twist. Too late. The trees ahead shivered, though there was no wind. Something moved between them, not running but flowing, its limbs elongating to keep pace with the jeep. The headlights caught its face for a fraction of a second. Stretched skin, a mouth unhinging like a snake, and eyes that were Javier's, down to the scar above his eyebrow. The journal leapt from the floorboards, pages flapping as if caught in a gale. The final entry glowed, the ink fresh as a wound. It wears what it eats. Priya slammed the brakes. The Wendigo stood in the road, Javier's face melting into Lena's, then her daughter's, then, horribly, mine. Its jaw distended and it screamed in our united voices, a sound that shattered the jeep's windows. Lena's hands flew to her ears, blood streaking her temples. The Wendigo lunged. And the world went black. When I woke, the jeep was upside down, wheels still spinning. Priya was gone. Lena too. Only the journal remained, pristine on the passenger seat, its pages open to a new sketch. The three of us, strung up like carcasses in a butcher's shop, the Wendigo's fingers buried in our ribs. From the trees, a whisper. "Hungry yet?" The voice was Javier's, but the cadence was wrong, slurred, sticky, like something chewing around the words. I clawed free of the wreckage, glass biting my palms. The journal lay face down in the mud, its pages fluttering as though turned by invisible fingers. The Black River woods loomed around me, their trunks blackened as if burned from the inside. No birds, no wind, just the wet click of something adjusting its jaw. I turned slowly. It stood 3 paces away, its elongated shadow swallowing mine. Its skin was no longer gray but translucent, stretched thin over a cage of ribs that pulsed with stolen warmth. Javier's face sagged from its skull like a half-shed mask, his lips sewn shut with strands of Priya's hair. Lena's crucifix dangled from its collarbone, the silver blackened where it touched flesh. The journal's pages rustled. I didn't need to look to know what they'd say. The Wendigo tilted its head, its neck cracking wetly. "You left them," it sighed, Lena's voice now threaded with static, just like Javier. Its fingers flexed, each knuckle popping. The stench of spoiled meat thickened. Behind it the trees shivered. Figures emerged, Priya, her thermal gear fused to her skin, her mouth sewn shut with sinew. Lena, her ribcage pried open like a butterfly's wings, her lungs still hitching. And Javier, his hollowed-out torso stuffed with pine needles, his lips moving soundlessly. The Wendigo smiled, not with its stolen faces but from beneath them, a second mouth splitting its chest, teeth glistening with fresh saliva. "They taste better when they're afraid," it whispered. I reached for the machete buried in my thigh. The pain was distant, irrelevant. The blade came free with a suck of flesh. The Wendigo didn't flinch. It leaned closer, its breath frosting my face. "You will too," it promised. Then the journal burst into flames, not orange but black, the fire consuming the pages without light. The Wendigo hissed, recoiling. In the ashes, one phrase glowed. "It lies." The figures in the trees twitched in unison. their mouths unstitched. And they screamed. The sound wasn't human. It was the wail of frozen branches shearing under ice, the groan of a glacier splitting open to reveal the rot beneath. My ears popped, blood trickling warm down my neck. The Wendigo staggered back, its stolen faces peeling like wet parchment, revealing the slick, pulsating darkness beneath. The journal's ashes swirled in the air, forming new words that seared my retinas. ITFEARS fire. Priya's machete trembled in my grip. The blade wasn't silver, just cold steel, but the edge glinted with something darker now, soaked in the Wendigo's bile. The figures in the trees convulsed, their borrowed skins sloughing off in meaty chunks. Javier's hollowed-out torso collapsed first, his ribs snapping like kindling as the pine needles inside him moved, writhing into a nest of centipedes. The Wendigo's chest mouth yawned wider, its teeth vibrating with a sound like a rattlesnake's tail. "Burn me," it taunted, Lena's voice layered with Priya's choked sobs. "You'll only feed the hunger." The trees behind it bent inward, their bark splitting to reveal veins of black ice. The air turned thick, syrupy, each breath scraping my lungs raw. Then the journal's ashes moved. They spiraled into my palm, hot as embers but painless, coalescing into a single word branded onto my flesh. Light. The Wendigo hissed, its elongated fingers spasming. Behind it, the foe Lena twitched, her splayed ribs snapping shut like a bear trap. I didn't think, I lunged. The machete struck true, plunging into the Wendigo's chest mouth, but the blade didn't pierce flesh. It stuck, suspended in the void between its teeth. The creature laughed, a wet, gurgling sound, and wrapped its fingers around my wrist. Its touch was absence, a vacuum of warmth, my skin turning gray where it gripped. Then my branded palm ignited. Not fire, something older, a light that cast no shadow but made the Wendigo's flesh bubble like tar. It shrieked, a sound that shattered the frozen trees into jagged shards. The figures behind it melted, their forms dissolving into black smoke that stank of burnt hair and spoiled marrow. The Wendigo recoiled, its chest-mouth snapping shut with a sound like a coffin lid slamming. It scuttled backward, limbs folding wrong, until it was nothing but a hunched shadow bleeding into the trees. The branded word on my palm faded, the ashes settled. Silence. Then from the wrecked jeep the radio crackled to life. A new voice, dry, ancient, gleeful, whispered, "Now it knows your name." The headlights flickered once, and died. The radio's whisper clung to the air like the stench of decay. My branded hand throbbed, not with pain but with a cold deeper than marrow. The trees stood sentinel, their branches creaking in a wind I couldn't feel. The Wendigo was gone, but the woods remembered. Priya's machete lay at my feet, its edge blackened where the Wendigo's teeth had gnawed. I reached for it. The handle was warm, pulsing faintly as if something slept beneath the steel. The journal's ashes swirled around my boots, forming jagged symbols, Algonquian, before scattering into the undergrowth. A twig snapped. Not from the trees, from inside me. I looked down, my ribs flexed, skin stretching taut over a hunger so vast it hollowed my thoughts. The Wendigo's voice slithered up my throat, tasting my terror with a forked tongue. "You cut me," it mused, its words vibrating in my molars. "Now we share the wound." The jeep's headlights guttered. In their dying glow, my reflection in the cracked windshield rippled, jaw elongating, pupils swallowing the irises whole. I wrenched away, but the hunger followed, gnawing at the edges of my vision. The trees swayed, their roots writhing like entrails. Then came the laughter. Not the Wendigo's, hers. Lena stood between the pines, her thermal suit fused to her skin, the zipper teeth embedded in her collarbone. Her ribs were intact, pristine, but her mouth was sewn shut with strands of Javier's hair. She tilted her head, eyes wide and wet, and pointed at my chest. I looked down. The machete's pommel had melted into my palm, the metal threading through my veins in black tendrils. Where it pierced my skin, the flesh puckered, not bleeding but breathing, inhaling the winter air with a sound like a starving man gulping soup. Lena's muffled scream tore through the silence. She lunged, fingers clawing at her stitched lips until they split, unleashing a torrent of black beetles. They scurried toward me, forming words at my feet. "It's in the metal." The machete twitched in my grip. "Alive. Hungry. And mine." I didn't raise the machete, it lifted me, my arm jerking like a marionette string. Lena's beetle words crunched underfoot as I lurched toward her, the blade humming with a sound like a hive waking. Her eyes widened, not with fear but recognition. She mouthed a name, Javier S. The truth hit like the blade's edge. The Wendigo wasn't just in the metal, it was in us all. Javier had carried it first, unknowing, his machete a hollow tooth pumping venom into his veins. Then Priya, her thermal gear fused to her skin like a second layer of hunger. Lena, stitching her own lips shut with borrowed hair. Me, branded with its lies. Lena didn't run. She smiled, her teeth blackening as she pressed her palms to my chest. The machete plunged, not into her but through her, the steel meeting no resistance. Her body dissolved into a swirl of ash and static, her voice whispering from the trees, "You were always the weak one." The blade turned in my grip, its point now hovering over my own sternum. The Wendigo's laughter vibrated in my bones. "Eat or be eaten," it sighed, its breath frosting the steel. I let go. The machete clattered to the frozen earth, its hunger shriveling like a severed nerve. The woods exhaled. The trees sagged, their blackened bark sloughing off to reveal fresh growth beneath. The journal's ashes ignited one last time, their flames casting no heat, only light, clean light, scouring the shadows from my skin. When the government men found me at dawn, I was kneeling in the snow, my hands empty. They took the machete, the jeep, the scraps of Lena's thermal suit, asked no questions. Their badges bore a familiar insignia, Project Pale Hunger. As they led me away, one agent paused, his boot nudging a half-melted patch of ice. Beneath it, the journal's final page lay intact, its ink still fresh. "It starves." The agent read it, shrugged, and kicked snow over the words. But I knew. So did the thing watching from the trees. Its silence was the only mercy left. The government men, or what passed for them, bundled me into an unmarked van, their gloved hands avoiding my branded palm. The last agent lingered, his breath fogging as he stared at the woods. Something moved between the trees, a gaunt shadow, its ribs glistening with frost. The agent's hand twitched toward his sidearm, but the Wendigo smiled, its stolen face peeling back to reveal the void beneath. The van door slammed shut. The engine growled to life. Through the reinforced glass, I watched the agent stand frozen, his pupils dilating as the Wendigo's fingers brushed his cheek. He didn't scream. He melted, his flesh sloughing off like wet clay, his skeleton collapsing into a heap of blackened ice. The driver didn't react. The van rolled forward, tires crushing the agent's discarded badge, Pale Hunger Level 9. 3 days later, they dumped me in a motel outside Reno. No debrief, no threats, just a manila envelope on the lumpy mattress. Inside, a single Polaroid, Javier alive but wrong, his eyes pools of ink, his lips stitched shut with silver wire. On the back, in block letters, "He remembers you." I burned the photo. The flames turned black, the smoke coiling into a shape with too many joints. The motel TV flickered on, static resolving into a news segment. Mass hysteria in Black River Woods, search ongoing for missing hikers. The footage showed Priya's thermal vest, empty and bloodied, dangling from a pine branch. The Wendigo's voice slithered from the shower drain. "Hunger doesn't end. It changes asterisk hosts." I packed the machete, left by my door, its blade now cold, and drove east. The radio spat Javier's laughter between songs. At a rest stop, I buried the weapon in a shallow grave, salting the earth with holy water I didn't believe in. The wind carried whispers as I walked away. You'll come back when the cold comes. Maybe. But for now, the hunger slept. And so did I. The Wendigo Protocol. Jesus Christ, Becca, your hands are shaking. Becca Valentine blinked, staring at the coffee mug she hadn't realized she was holding. The black liquid trembled, spilling over the rim onto her knuckles. Hot. She didn't flinch. Garza leaned across the diner booth, his fingers snapping in front of her face. Hey, Earth to Lieutenant, you gonna drink that or baptize yourself in it? She set the mug down too hard. The clatter made a couple of truckers glance over. Bad dream, she muttered. Garza didn't buy it. His eyes dark as the coffee between them flicked to the scar on her wrist, the one shaped like a crescent moon. Bullshit. You only get that look when her phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Then a third time, vibrating so violently it skittered across the Formica tabletop. Priority red. Becca flipped it open before the second ring. No caller ID. No greeting. Just coordinates and 2 words in blocky military font. ITS back. Garza whistled low under his breath. Well, bang me sideways with a chainsaw. He was already pulling his laptop from his duffel, fingers flying across the keys. Satellite S got thermal anomalies in Wapusk, same grid as last time. Only this time, he spun the screen toward her. The image was grainy but unmistakable, a humanoid shape, too tall, too thin, moving through the pines like they were mist. Garza's fingers hesitated over the keyboard for the first time in years. Trees don't bend like that, he muttered. Not unless something's pushing them. The thermal image flickered. A glitch, maybe, or the thing moving faster than the satellite could track. Becca's coffee had gone cold. She tasted blood where she'd bitten her cheek. The diner door slammed open. Holloway stood silhouetted against the neon sign, his duffel slung over one shoulder like he'd just come from the gym. The crucifix tattoo peeked above his collar. Raslow's mobilizing the old team, he said, dropping into the booth. His knee hit the table. The mug jumped. Chen's already prepping the sedatives. Says she's got a new cocktail guaranteed to drop a Wendigo or your money back. His grin didn't reach his eyes. Becca exhaled through her nose. Rook. Holloway's grin vanished. Volunteered for bait duty before Raslow even finished the briefing. He pulled a silver-tipped bullet from his pocket, rolling it between his fingers. Kid S got a death wish. The helicopter blades thrummed like a panicked heartbeat as Keller banked hard over the tree line. Snow whipped through the open bay door, stinging Becca's face as she cinched her harness tighter. Below them, the forest stretched endless, white, wrong. Garza's voice crackled in her earpiece, half drowned by static. Heat signatures moving northeast, fast, too fast. A pause. It knows we're here. Holloway racked the slide on his modified rifle, the silver filigree along the barrel glinting under the cabin lights. Tell Rook to stop humming. Christ, kid, you're gonna attract it. Rook grinned, sharp and feral, fingers drumming against his thigh. That's the point, he mouthed, then thumbed the comms off before Becca could reprimand him. The helicopter lurched as Keller swore into the comms. Hold on to your goddamn kidneys. The world tilted sideways, trees blurring past the open bay door as something thumped against the hull. Metal groaned. Becca's harness bit into her ribs, her fingers scrambling for purchase on the bench as Chen's vials shattered across the floor. Rook laughed, wild and unhinged, as he unbuckled himself. That's our cue. He lunged for the door before Becca could grab him, the wind whipping his jacket open to reveal the crude Wendigo skull tattooed over his sternum. Holloway's curse was lost in the rotor noise as Rook jumped, vanishing into the snow below. Garza's voice cut through the chaos, strained but steady. Thermals show it circling back. Fuck, it's hurting us. Becca's stomach dropped. The Wendigo wasn't fleeing. It was corralling them toward the clearing where Rook had landed. Keller banked again, the tree line rushing up to meet them. Setting down now, the skids hit snow with a bone-jarring crunch. Becca hit the release on her harness, boots slamming into the frozen ground before the rotors even stilled. Holloway tossed her a rifle, the stock already notched with kill marks from their last hunt. Chen knelt beside her shattered vials, salvaging what she could into fresh syringes. "Sedative stable," she said, voice clinical. "But we'll need direct injection." Becca's breath fogged in the frigid air as she scanned the tree line, nothing but skeletal pines and the fading whine of the helicopter's rotors. Then a click, like antlers tapping bark. Chen's head snapped up, syringe glinting in her grip. "Did you?" Another click, closer. Holloway shouldered his rifle, the scope reflecting the pale winter sun. Movement, 11 o'clock. His voice was tight, not rook. The trees bent, not from wind, there wasn't any, but from something moving through them, trunks warping like rubber. Becca's finger hovered over the rifle's trigger, her breath a thin white thread in the air. "Chen," she murmured, "tell me you see that." Chen didn't blink. "Oh, I see it." Her syringe trembled slightly, the liquid inside catching the light. "And it sees us." A branch snapped. Holloway's scope traced the sound. "Fuck me," he breathed. The Wendigo stood half-hidden behind a pine, its two long fingers curled around the trunk like it was merely leaning against it. Except its claws pierced the bark, sinking in like the tree was butter. Its head tilted, slow, curious, antlers scraping the lower branches with a sound like knives on bone. Then Rook's voice crackled over the comms, giddy and raw. "Hey, ugly!" A rock sailed from the underbrush, bouncing off the Wendigo's ribcage with a hollow thunk. It didn't flinch. It didn't even look. Its eyes, black pits that swallowed the light, stayed locked on Becca. Becca's finger twitched against the trigger, but she didn't fire. Not yet. The Wendigo's chest rose and fell in slow, deliberate breaths, steam curling from its nostrils like smoke from a dying fire. Its ribcage pulsed unnaturally, too many bones shifting under skin stretched translucent. Rook's laughter echoed through the comms again, closer now. "You deaf and dumb." Another rock flew. This one struck the Wendigo's temple with a wet crack. Black fluid oozed down its cheekbone. Slowly, so slowly, its head swiveled toward the sound. Becca's breath hitched. "Rook, shut up." The Wendigo moved, not in a blur that would have been easier to track, but in disjointed slides, its limbs snapping forward like a broken film reel. One moment it was by the tree. The next, its antlers gouged the snow where Rook had been standing half a second prior. Rook rolled, springing up with a switchblade flashing in his hand. "Missed me, shitbird." The Wendigo's head twitched, a grotesque insectal motion, as Rook's blade slashed across its forearm. Black ichor sprayed, steaming where it hit the snow. Becca's rifle snapped up, but Holloway's hand clamped onto her barrel before she could fire. "Wait," he hissed. Chen was already moving, slipping through the trees with the syringe held low. The Wendigo's attention locked onto Rook, who danced backward, taunting it with jerky, exaggerated movements. "That all you got? My grandma hits harder." The creature's jaw unhinged, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth, and lunged. Rook dodged barely, but the Wendigo's claws caught his jacket, shredding the fabric like tissue paper. Chen seized the opening, darting in from behind, syringe raised. The Wendigo twisted mid-lunge, its spine bending sideways like a snapped sapling. Its elbow caught Chen square in the ribs, sending her crashing into a snowdrift. The syringe spun away, plunger depressed, its contents bleeding into the dirt. Holloway finally released Becca's rifle. "Fuck waiting," he fired. The silver-tipped round punched through the Wendigo's clavicle, spraying black mist. It staggered, then laughed, a sound like ice cracking underfoot. The wound sealed itself in seconds, flesh knitting with a wet, squelching noise. The Wendigo's laughter cut off abruptly as Rook's switchblade buried itself hilt-deep in its left eye socket. Black fluid geysered across the snow. "Surprise, motherfucker!" Rook crowed, twisting the blade, then screamed as the Wendigo's hand closed around his wrist. Bones snapped like kindling. Becca didn't think. She fired 3 rounds into the creature's ribs, Holloway's silver-tipped shot punching through its right knee simultaneously. The Wendigo staggered, Rook's wrist still clutched in its grip, but didn't release him. Its remaining eye rolled wildly, pupil dilating until the black swallowed the surrounding white. Chen groaned from the snowbank, clutching her ribs. "Pheromones," she gasped. "Pocket, use it." Becca lunged for Chen's discarded vest, fingers closing around a glass vial just as the Wendigo yanked. Rook's arm came off at the elbow with a wet pop. He didn't scream, just stared at the stump, oddly fascinated, as arterial spray painted the snow crimson. The creature brought the severed limb to its mouth and bit down, teeth shearing through flesh like it was overripe fruit. Holloway's next shot took off 2 of its fingers. The Wendigo hissed, dropping Rook's arm, and swung its antlers toward Holloway. Becca hurled the vial. It shattered against the creature's chest, releasing a cloud of amber vapor that smelled like rotting meat and copper. The Wendigo froze, nostrils flaring, then shrieked, a sound that split the air like a saw blade. It forgot Holloway, forgot Rook. Its entire body quivered, muscles rippling under parchment-thin skin, pupils blown wide with primal hunger. The Wendigo spasmed, its limbs jerking like a marionette with tangled strings. Becca lunged for Rook, dragging him backward as the creature's claws gouged trenches in the snow where he'd been kneeling. "Chen, now!" she barked. Chen was already moving, a fresh syringe glinting between her fingers. The Wendigo's head snapped toward her, but its movements were sluggish now, drugged by whatever pheromones had erupted from the shattered vial. Its remaining eye rolled wildly, tracking Chen's approach with drunken fascination. "Hold still, you bastard," Chen muttered. She drove the needle into the creature's ribs with a grunt. The plunger depressed. The Wendigo shuddered, its spine arching backward at an impossible angle, then collapsed face first into the snow. Silence. The Wendigo lay motionless, steam rising from its grotesque form as the sedative took hold. Rook slumped against Becca, his breath coming in ragged, wet gasps. "Told you," he coughed, spraying blood onto her sleeve. "I'd piss it off." His remaining hand clutched the stump of his wrist, fingers twitching like dying spiders. Chen knelt beside the creature, her fingers pressing into its neck. "Pulse is slow but erratic. We have maybe 10 minutes before it metabolizes the sedative." Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she secured fresh tourniquets around Rook's stump. Holloway kicked the Wendigo's ribs hard. It didn't stir. "Cage," he growled. "Now." He jerked his chin toward the tree line where Garza emerged, dragging a reinforced steel mesh behind him. His face was sheet white, one sleeve soaked in black ichor. "Voss is gone," he said flatly. "Sims, too, found pieces of him inside a fucking birch tree." Becca's stomach lurched, but she didn't let it show. "Get the cage rigged." She grabbed Rook's good arm, hauling him toward the chopper. Keller was already prepping the engines, his face a mask of grim focus. The Wendigo twitched in its cage as Keller's helicopter clawed through the sky, the reinforced steel mesh groaning under its weight. Black ichor seeped through the gaps, sizzling where it hit the heated floor panels. Rook slumped against the bulkhead, his remaining hand clamped over the stump of his wrist, face pale as the snow outside. Chen worked silently beside him, suturing flesh with hands that no longer shook. "ETA 6 minutes," Keller barked over the rotor noise. His knuckles were white on the controls. "And tell that thing to stop breathing like that." Becca glanced at the cage. The Wendigo's ribs expanded and contracted unnaturally, its breath rattling like wind through dead leaves. Holloway crouched beside the mesh, silver-tipped knife in hand. "One more twitch," he murmured, "and I'll carve out your other eye." The creature's remaining pupil flicked toward him, aware. Becca's fingers tightened around her rifle. "Chen, sedative." The Wendigo's eye rolled toward Chen just as she plunged the second syringe into its neck. Its breath hitched, a wet, guttural sound, then slowed to a shuddering rasp. Its pupil dilated, black swallowing the last sliver of white before the eyelid slid shut. Garza wiped his sleeve across his forehead, leaving a smear of ichor. "Facilities prepped," he said, tapping his earpiece. Raslo wants it in the mirrors before it wakes up. The helicopter banked sharply, throwing Holloway against the cage. The mesh groaned as the Wendigo's limp form shifted, its antlers scraping metal. A single drop of black fluid oozed from its nostril, hanging suspended for a heartbeat before splattering onto Rook's boot. Rook stared at it, his lips peeling back in a grin that was more rictus than smile. "Tastes like pennies," he slurred, tongue darting out to catch the blood dripping from his own chin. The helicopter's skids hit Facility X-12's landing pad with a teeth-rattling clang. Keller didn't bother shutting down the rotors fully, just killed the engines and yanked his harness loose. "Out, now." His voice was raw, "before it fucking sneezes awake." Garza was already dragging the cage toward the hangar doors, his boots slipping in pooled ichor. The Wendigo's breath fogged the steel mesh, each exhale longer than the last. Becca shouldered Rook's weight. He'd stopped talking 3 minutes ago, his good hand gone limp around the tourniquet, and followed Chen's bloody footprints across the tarmac. The facility's interior was sterile white and cold, the air smelling of antiseptic and something older like wet stone. Raslo waited by the elevator, his three-fingered hand tapping the keycard against his thigh, his gaze locked onto the cage. "Jesus wept," he muttered. Then sharper, "Mirror rooms prepped. Move." The elevator descended 7 floors without stopping. The Wendigo twitched once, its antlers scraping the ceiling. Holloway pressed his knife to its throat. "Don't," he said softly. The creature stilled. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a cavernous chamber lined floor to ceiling with mirrors, their surfaces warped slightly at the edges like funhouse glass. Raslo gestured sharply. "Get it in the center." His voice echoed unnaturally, bouncing between reflections until it sounded like a dozen commanders speaking at once. Garza and Holloway dragged the cage forward, the wheels squealing against the polished concrete. The Wendigo's breath hitched, a wet, guttural sound, as its reflection multiplied infinitely in the mirrored walls. Its remaining eyelid twitched. Chen knelt beside Rook against the far wall, her fingers pressing into his carotid. "Pulse is thready," she said, too calmly. "Needs or now." Raslo didn't look away from the cage. "Med team's waiting upstairs. Finish this first." Becca's knuckles ached around her rifle stock. The Wendigo's fingers twitched, claws scraping the mesh. Its pupil slit open, a vertical black line in a sea of yellowed sclera, fixing on Raslo with eerie focus. The Wendigo's pupil contracted, a predator's instinct as Raslo stepped closer. Its breath fogged the cage bars, smelling of spoiled meat and winter graves. Becca's finger hovered near the trigger, but Raslo shook his head. "Not yet." He crouched until his three-fingered hand rested on the mesh, inches from the creature's claws. "Can you understand me?" The Wendigo's jaw unhinged with a wet pop. Black saliva dripped onto the floor, hissing where it touched steel. Raslo didn't flinch. "Good." He tapped the cage with his keycard. "Lights." The overhead fluorescence flickered to black. For 3 heartbeats, there was only the Wendigo's rattling breath and the scent of Rook's blood thickening the air. Then the mirrors ignited, UV panels flaring to life behind the glass. The creature shrieked, its body thrashing against the mesh as its reflection fractured into 1,000 pieces. Its skin bubbled, peeling back to reveal muscle slick with black ichor. The Wendigo's scream didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like a glacier calving, a deep, tectonic shudder that vibrated in Becca's molars. The UV light seared its flesh where the mirrors reflected it, the creature's skin sloughing off in wet ribbons. Raslo watched, unmoving, as the Wendigo's claws scrabbled against the mesh, leaving streaks of blackened tissue. "It's learning," Chen murmured. Becca followed her gaze. The Wendigo was twisting its head at odd angles, avoiding direct eye contact with its reflections. Its remaining pupil, dilated to a pinprick, flicked between the mirrors, calculating. Then it moved, not to escape, to align itself. Its body contorted until the UV reflections intersected at a single point on its chest, where the skin was already knitting back together. Raslo cursed and slammed his palm against the control panel. The mirrors dimmed. The Wendigo's breath evened out, its ribs expanding with a wet, sucking sound. Holloway lunged forward, pressing his knife against the mesh. "Kill it now," he snarled. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, black swallowing yellow as Holloway's knife pressed against the mesh. Its lips peeled back, revealing rows of needle-thin teeth. Not a snarl, a smile. Raslo's hand shot out, gripping Holloway's wrist. "Stand down, Lieutenant." His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "It's adapting. Watch." He nodded toward the creature's chest where the UV burns had begun to pulse, ichor thickening into a protective carapace. Chen inhaled sharply. "It's metabolizing the light." Her fingers twitched toward her remaining syringe, like photosynthesis in reverse. The Wendigo's head lolled toward her, antlers scraping the cage floor. Its tongue, too long, too black, flicked out, tasting the air. Rook's blood, Chen's pheromones, fear. The Wendigo's breath hitched, a sound like wind through a cracked ribcage. Its pupil flicked to Chen's syringe, then back to her face. Becca's rifle stock dug into her shoulder, her finger taut against the trigger. "Wait," Raslo's grip on Holloway's wrist seemed to say. "Watch." The creature's chest pulsed faster now, the UV burns knitting into ridges of blackened cartilage. Its fingers flexed, claws scraping the mesh in deliberate strokes, not random struggling. Patterns. Garza's breath fogged his laptop screen as he tapped frantically. "It's coding." His voice cracked. "Binary, Morse, something." The Wendigo's tongue lashed again, this time toward the ceiling vents. Becca's stomach dropped. "It's mapping the airflow." Chen's syringe trembled. "Learning exits." Raslo finally released Holloway's wrist. "Sedate it, full dose." His missing fingers twitched, then weld the cage shut. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, black swallowing yellow as Chen's syringe plunged into its neck. Its jaw unhinged silently, a drop of black saliva hanging suspended before splattering onto Raslo's boot. The creature's fingers spasmed, claws etching jagged symbols into the mesh. Garza's laptop chimed. "It's repeating the same sequence," he whispered, "over and over." Holloway leaned in, his crucifix tattoo glistening with sweat. "What's it say?" Garza's throat clicked. "Let me out." The Wendigo's eyelid fluttered, its chest stilled. Raslo exhaled through his nose and turned toward the elevator. "Weld it, then prep the containment unit." His three-fingered hand hovered over the keycard reader. "And someone get Rook to surgery before he bleeds out on my floor." The welding torches hissed to life, blue flames licking at the cage seams as the Wendigo's body slumped deeper into sedation. Becca watched the creature's ribs rise and fall in slow, stuttering motions, each breath stretching its translucent skin tighter over the knobs of its spine. The symbols it had scratched into the mesh were already fading, the metal healing itself under the heat. Garza's fingers flew across his keyboard, eyes darting between the Wendigo and his screen. "It's not just repeating the message," he muttered. "It's layering it, binary under Morse under," his breath hitched. "Christ, that S Navajo." Chen pressed a fresh bandage against Rook's stump, her fingers stained red. "Languages require teachers," she said softly. "Who the hell taught a Wendigo to?" The elevator dinged. A med team burst through the doors, their gurney rattling across the concrete. Rook's head lolled toward them, his remaining eye glassy with blood loss. "Told you I'd piss it off," he slurred, before the medics hoisted him onto the stretcher. His boot dragged through the Wendigo's black spit, leaving a smeared trail toward the elevator. The welding torches cut off abruptly, leaving the cage glowing dull orange at the seams. The sudden silence pressed against Becca's eardrums, broken only by Rook's fading whimper as the medics wheeled him away. The Wendigo lay motionless in its prison, its chest rising in shallow, uneven hitches. A single drop of black fluid oozed from its nostril, tracing the curve of its upper lip before dripping onto the floor. Garza's laptop screen flickered, casting jagged shadows across his face. It's not just language, he whispered. His fingers hovered over the trackpad. Their structure, grammar, syntax. He swallowed hard. This thing isn't mimicking, it's communicating. Holloway's knife twitched in his grip. Bullshit. His crucifix tattoo gleamed under the UV reflections. It's a goddamn animal. The Wendigo's eyelid twitched, a minuscule spasm but deliberate. Its pupil, a pinprick of black in a sea of jaundiced yellow, rolled toward Garza's laptop. The laptop screen flickered again, a staccato burst of static that resolved into jagged symbols. Garza's breath caught. It's responding. His fingers hesitated over the keys. To me. The Wendigo's pupil contracted, its eyelid drooping as the sedative took deeper hold. But its fingertip twitched against the mesh, leaving a fresh smear of black ichor. Garza's screen updated instantly. A string of binary, then Navajo glyphs, then something that looked like cuneiform. Chen edged closer, her boot scuffing through Rook's blood trail. Ask it where it learned. The Wendigo's head snapped up, antlers screeching against the cage roof. Its jaw unhinged with a wet pop, revealing not teeth but words, a guttural rasp that echoed the symbols on Garza's screen. The sound wasn't a snarl or a scream. It was speech, syllables grinding together like stones in a mortar. Garza's laptop screen exploded with text, lines of code and glyphs scrolling too fast to read. Chen stumbled back, her heel slipping in Rook's blood. What the fuck? The Wendigo's throat convulsed, its vocal cords vibrating unnaturally as the sound deepened, thickened, resolved into something almost human. A word, a name. Raslo. The name hung in the air like a curse. Raslo froze mid-step, his boot squeaking against the concrete. His three-fingered hand twitched toward his sidearm, slow, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this moment in his dreams. The Wendigo's jaw clicked shut. Its pupil, a slit of black and yellowed sclera, tracked Raslo's movement with eerie precision. The UV lights reflected in its eye made it look like it was staring into the sun. Garza's laptop screen went black. Then in crisp white letters, Ask ITHOW. Holloway's knife hand shook. Sir. Raslo's remaining fingers flexed once, deliberate, controlled, before dropping away from his holster. The Wendigo's breath fogged the cage bars, its pupil dilating as it tracked the movement. Garza, Raslo said, too calmly. Translate. Garza's fingers trembled over the keyboard. It's not speaking anymore, just that one word. The screen flickered, lines of binary dissolving into static. But the logs, his throat clicked. The logs show it's been repeating your name for the past 2 minutes, buried in the code layers. Chen's syringe glinted as she edged closer to the cage. Sedatives wearing off, pupil response is faster. Her voice was clinical, but her knuckles whitened around the plunger. It recognizes you. The Wendigo's antlers scraped the mesh as it tilted its head, a grotesque parody of curiosity. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air between Raslo and the cage. Holloway's knife twitched. Sir, orders. Raslo exhaled through his nose, slow, measured, before stepping toward the cage. His boots left no prints in Rook's drying blood. The Wendigo's pupil tracked him, unblinking as he stopped just outside the mesh. You know me, he said, not a question. The creature's ribs hitched. A wet, clicking sound bubbled in its throat. Garza's laptop screen flared to life, glyphs scrolling too fast to parse, except for one repeating at the margins. A jagged symbol that resolved into a crude sketch of a hand, 3 fingers missing. Holloway's knife clattered to the floor. Jesus Christ. Chen's syringe slipped from her grip, embedding itself in the concrete. It's not just recognizing you, she whispered. It's remembering. Raslo's 3-fingered hand twitched toward the cage mesh, then froze. The Wendigo's pupil contracted to a pinprick, tracking the movement with inhuman precision. Its tongue lashed out again, this time leaving a black smear across the bars directly opposite Raslo's missing digits. Garza's laptop screen stuttered, glyphs collapsing into a single repeating image, a military insignia from 20 years ago, Arctic Containment Unit, Raslow's old patch. Chen's breath fogged the air between them. "Sir, that's impossible." The Wendigo's ribs hitched, a wet, shuddering motion, and its jaw unhinged with a sound like cracking ice. The word that emerged wasn't garbled this time, crisp, clear. "Corporal." The rank hung in the air like a gunshot. Raslow's spine straightened, an old reflex muscle memory from a lifetime ago. His three-fingered hand curled into a fist. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, drinking in his reaction. Chen's boot scuffed backward. "It knows your rank." Garza's laptop screen refreshed, a rapid-fire scroll of mission reports dated 2 decades prior. Arctic Containment Unit, blacked out names. One photo remained unredacted, a younger Raslow, frostbitten and grimacing, his right hand wrapped in bloody gauze. The Wendigo's claw tapped the mesh click-click-click in perfect sync with the timestamp on the file. The UV lights hummed, casting fractured reflections across Raslow's face, lines deepening as his jaw clenched. The Wendigo's breath hitched in sync with Garza's scrolling screen, each exhale fogging the mesh where Raslow's missing fingers should have been. Chen's voice cracked the silence. "Sir, that photo was classified." Garza's fingers froze over the keyboard. The screen flickered, not from static but from input. The Wendigo's claws twitched, ichor dripping in perfect rhythm with the cursor blinking on Garza's display. Holloway's crucifix gleamed under the fluorescence as he bent to retrieve his knife, his whisper raw. "It's hacking us." Raslow didn't blink. "Garza, isolate the terminal." Garza's fingers flew across the keyboard, Alt F4, command overrides, firewall protocols. But the screen kept refreshing, glyphs multiplying like spores. The Wendigo's pupil tracked each keystroke, its breath syncing with the laptop's fan whine. Chen grabbed Garza's shoulder. "Unplug it." The Wendigo's jaw unhinged, not to speak, to laugh, a sound like radio static and breaking glass. The laptop screen exploded with text, not code but names, dozens, hundreds, all Arctic containment personnel from Raslow's era, and beside each a date. A death date. The UV lights buzzed louder, their hum climbing to a whine as the Wendigo's laughter dissolved into a wet gurgle. Raslow didn't move, didn't breathe, as the names scrolled past on Garza's screen. The last one froze, highlighted in pulsing red. Corporal M. Raslo, deceased, 12/21/2003. Holloway's knife clattered to the floor again. "That's fuck." Chen's fingers dug into Garza's shoulder. "It's lying, it has to be." The Wendigo's pupil dilated, its gaze locked on Raslow. Its tongue flicked out, tasting the air between them. Garza's laptop screen refreshed one final time, a single line of text, crisp as a headstone engraving. "You died in the snow." Raslow's breath fogged in the sterile air, his three-fingered hand hovering near the cage mesh. The Wendigo's pupil didn't blink, just dilated and contracted in slow, deliberate pulses, like a lidless camera adjusting its aperture. Garza's laptop screen went black. Then, in stark white letters, "Ask IT how you survived." Chen's boots squeaked against the concrete as she edged backward. "Sir, we need to." The Wendigo's ribs hitched, a wet sucking sound, and its jaw unhinged again. This time the word that emerged was guttural, half-digested, "Skinwalker." The word hung in the air like a curse, thick with the stench of rotting meat. Raslow's remaining fingers twitched toward his sidearm, then froze. The Wendigo's pupil contracted, tracking the aborted movement with eerie precision. Its tongue lashed out again, this time leaving a black smear on the mesh directly opposite Raslow's missing fingers. Garza's laptop screen flickered back to life, glyphs rearranging themselves into a crude sketch, a humanoid figure peeling away its own skin like a wet suit. Beneath it, the flesh writhed, antlers splitting through muscle, two long limbs stretching taut. Chen's breath hitched. That's not possible, Raslo finished softly. His three-fingered hand flexed once, deliberately. The Wendigo mirrored the motion, its claws scraping the mesh in perfect sync. Holloway's knife clattered to the floor. Bullshit. His crucifix tattoo gleamed under the UV lights. Skinwalkers are Navajo, this thing's Algonquin. The Wendigo's head tilted with an audible crack of vertebrae, its pupil flicking to Holloway. Garza's laptop screen updated instantly, a flood of Algonquin syllabics scrolling too fast to read, except for one recurring glyph, a stick figure with antlers and two sets of teeth. Chen's voice was barely audible. It's laughing at you. Raslo's sidearm cleared its holster, slow, deliberate, but the Wendigo didn't flinch, its pupil dilated, drinking in the barrel's silhouette. Garza's screen refreshed. Bang. Then, beneath it, you missed last time too. Holloway lunged for his knife. Fuck this. His blade flashed silver as he drove it toward the mesh, only to freeze mid-thrust as the Wendigo's tongue flicked through the bars, licking a black streak up the blade. The steel hissed, pitting instantly. The UV lights flickered violently as Holloway recoiled, his knife now corroded halfway to the hilt. The Wendigo's tongue retracted with a wet smack, its pupil dilating in something disturbingly close to amusement. Raslo's sidearm didn't waver, but his missing fingers twitched against the grip. Phantom pain or memory, Becca couldn't tell. Garza's laptop screen erupted with static, then resolved into a single image. A frozen Arctic wasteland, a figure sprawled in the snow. The Wendigo's claw tapped the mesh, click, 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 counting down as the timestamp on the photo ticked backward. Chen's voice cracked. That's the incident site. The Wendigo's ribs hitched, a wet, rattling sound, and its jaw unhinged again. This time the word was clearer, shaped by something that remembered human vocal cords. Mine. The word hung in the air, thick, guttural, possessive. Raslo's sidearm didn't waver, but his missing fingers twitched against the grip. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, its tongue flicking out to taste the tension. Garza's laptop screen refreshed, a frozen close-up of the Arctic photo, snow-dusted fingers clutching a rifle, the same 3 digits missing. Chen's breath fogged the space between them. Sir, that's your hand. The Wendigo's ribs expanded with a wet click. Its antlers scraped the cage roof as it leaned forward, the UV lights casting jagged reflections across its peeling skin. Garza's screen updated, a string of coordinates, Arctic Circle, 2003. Holloway's corroded knife clattered to the floor. It's saying you took it, that's why it knows. The Wendigo's pupil contracted to a vertical slit, black swallowing yellow as Raslo's sidearm clicked off safety. Its breath fogged the mesh in slow, deliberate pulses, synchronized with Garza's laptop fan whine. The screen flickered. You promised. Chen's boot scuffed backward. Sir. Raslo's trigger finger twitched. The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, not toward the gun but toward Raslo's missing fingers, a grotesque mimicry of a handshake. Garza's screen exploded with glyphs too fast to read, except one recurring symbol, a broken circle. Oath. Holloway's crucifix gleamed under the UV as he stepped between Raslo and the cage. Bullshit. These things don't negotiate. His voice wavered on the last word. The Wendigo's breath hitched, a sound like wind through a ribcage. Its pupil flicked to Holloway's crucifix, then back to Raslo's sidearm. Garza's laptop screen refreshed. You lie. Beneath it, in jagged Algonquin glyphs, the cross did not save HIM. Holloway's knife hand trembled. What the fuck is it? The Wendigo's jaw unhinged with a wet pop. Not to speak, to vomit. A black, tarry mass splattered against the mesh, sizzling where it touched silver. The substance writhed, not liquid, not solid, forming crude letters on the cage floor, SSGT. Elias Holloway, deceased, 12/21/2003. Chen's syringe rolled off the gurney, clattering against concrete. That's your father's. Holloway's breath left his lungs in a rush, his crucifix glinting as he staggered back. The black letters pulsed on the floor, ichor sizzling at the edges like wet ink on hot paper. The Wendigo's pupil tracked him, unblinking, its ribs expanding with a wet, satisfied sound. Garza's laptop screen updated. Another name, another death date. PVT. Lion Chen. 12/21/2003. Chen's fingers flew to her throat, her medic's insignia suddenly heavy against her collarbone. The Wendigo's tongue flicked out, tasting their shock. Garza's screen refreshed again, this time with a single, looping video, grainy Arctic footage of a man, Raslo, standing over a bleeding comrade, his three-fingered hand pressing a silver blade to the soldier's throat. The timestamp stuttered. 0003:47. December 21, 2003. Raslo's sidearm didn't waver. Garza killed the feed. Garza's fingers trembled over the keyboard, his keystrokes frantic but useless. The laptop wasn't responding to him anymore. The screen flickered, the video glitching to show Raslo's blade sinking in, then rewinding, then sinking in again. The timestamp jumped erratically. 0003:47. 0003:46. 0003:47. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, its breath sinking with the looped stutter of the footage. Its tongue lashed out again, this time leaving a black trail down the mesh, not ichor but letters, spelling out a single word in corroded steel. Liar. Chen's hand flew to her mouth. It's not just showing us, it's accusing you. Raslo's sidearm didn't waver, but his missing fingers twitched against the grip. The Wendigo's ribs hitched, a wet, clicking sound, and its jaw unhinged wider, revealing not teeth but more names, etched into the roof of its mouth in scar tissue. The Wendigo's throat convulsed, a sound like ice splitting underfoot, and the names spilled out in a black, tarry stream. SGT, Morno, PVT, Core, CPL, Vasquez. Each syllable hit the floor with a wet thud, writhing into the shape of dog tags before dissolving. Holloway's boot crushed one as he backed away, his crucifix swinging wildly. That's Delta Squad. His voice cracked. They went MIA with you. Chen's fingers dug into her own arms, her nails drawing blood. You said they drowned. The Wendigo's pupil contracted, fixing on Raslo. Its tongue flicked out, painting the mesh with a fresh smear, this time forming numbers. 34-17-8. The countdown from the Arctic footage. The numbers pulsed on the mesh like a failing heartbeat. 34-17-8. Raslo's remaining fingers flexed around his sidearm. Too late, Becca saw the tremor. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, drinking it in. Garza's laptop screen refreshed, not glyphs this time but audio waveforms. The Wendigo's ribs expanded, its breath sinking with the jagged peaks on-screen. A sound leaked out, not speech, but static, resolving into the unmistakable click-click hiss of an old comms headset. Arctic chatter from 20 years ago. Chen's hand flew to her earpiece as if she could block it out. That's your voice, she whispered. The waveform spiked, Raslo's voice, younger, raw with frostbite. Hold position, I see lights. The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, corroding the mesh where the numbers 34 had been. Garza's screen updated, thermal imaging from the Arctic footage, human shapes glowing in the snow and something between them, limbless and wrong. The timestamp jumped. 0003:48. The timestamp froze. The Wendigo's breath hitched, a sound like wind through a ribcage, and its pupil dilated until the black swallowed the yellow whole. Garza's laptop screen reflected in its glassy gaze, the thermal image warping as the creature's ribs expanded again, pressing against the cage mesh with a wet creak. Chen's syringe rolled into the growing pool of Rook's blood. It's not showing us the past, she whispered. It's showing us its memory. The Wendigo's jaw unhinged with a wet pop, its tongue unspooling like rotten film strip. The thermal image on Garza's screen shifted, the limbless shape resolving into a human silhouette but wrong, stretched too tall, its spine jagged with protruding antler nubs. The timestamp stuttered. 000349. Holloway's corroded knife slipped from his fingers. That's... The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, not toward Raslo this time, but toward Garza's laptop. The screen exploded with static, then resolved into a high-resolution close-up of the Arctic footage. Raslo's frostbitten face, his three-fingered hand gripping a silver knife buried in the chest of a writhing soldier. The soldier's mouth was stretched wide, not in pain but in laughter, his vocal cords vibrating with a sound no human throat could produce. The timestamp flickered. 000350. Chen's boot skidded in Rook's blood. "That's you," she breathed, staring at Raslo's missing fingers. "You're holding the knife." The Wendigo's ribs hitched, a wet clicking sound, and its pupil dilated until the black swallowed the screen's reflection whole. Garza's laptop updated, a new thermal image, the soldier's chest splitting open like overripe fruit, antlers erupting through muscle. The timestamp jumped. 000351. Holloway's crucifix clattered against his chest. "It wasn't hunting you," he whispered. "You made it." The timestamp froze at 000351. The Wendigo's breath synced with Garza's laptop fan, a wet, mechanical wheeze. Raslo's sidearm didn't waver, but his missing fingers twitched against the grip like phantom limbs. Chen's voice was raw. "You infected them." The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, etching fresh symbols into the corroded mesh. 34178. The countdown from the Arctic footage. The numbers pulsed, ichor sizzling at the edges. Garza's laptop screen glitched, the thermal image warping to show Raslo's three-fingered hand inside the soldier's chest cavity, fingers curled around something pulsing. The timestamp stuttered backward. 000350. 000349. The timestamp froze at 000348. The Wendigo's ribs expanded with a wet crack, pressing against the cage mesh until the silver filaments groaned. Garza's laptop screen flickered, not static this time, but live footage from Facility X12's security feed. Chen's breath hitched as the camera panned to show Rook's medical team halfway down the corridor, their silhouettes warping unnaturally under the fluorescence. Holloway's knife hand shook. "They're not. Look at their shadows." The Wendigo's pupil contracted, its tongue flicking out to taste the air. Garza's screen refreshed, thermal imaging of the medical team, their heat signatures pulsing in sync with the countdown numbers etched on the mesh. 34178. Raslo's sidearm clicked off safety. "Garza, lockdown protocol." Garza's fingers flew over the keyboard, firewall overrides, biometric locks, emergency containment. But the screen kept glitching, the security feed pixelating into static before snapping back with a jolt. The medical team's warped shadows elongated further, their spines twisting under their scrubs. Chen grabbed Garza's wrist. "They're changing." Her voice was too loud in the humming silence. The Wendigo's ribs hitched, wet, rhythmic, matching the 34178 pulsing on the mesh. Its pupil dilated, drinking in Raslo's stillness. Garza's laptop screen refreshed. The medical team's heat signatures now showed jagged protrusions along their shoulders, like antlers under skin. Holloway's boot crunched glass. "Too late," he whispered. The Wendigo's breath hitched, a wet, clicking metronome, as Facility X12's emergency lights flared red. Garza's laptop screen split, left side showing the medical team's thermal signatures elongating, right side replaying the Arctic footage frame by frame. At 000347, Raslo's younger self withdrew the silver blade from the soldier's chest. Black ichor dripped in perfect sync with Rook's blood pooling under the cage. Chen's syringe rolled into the crimson puddle with a plastic clink. "It's not just memory." Her voice was too calm. "It's a pattern." The Wendigo's pupil contracted, fixing on Raslo's missing fingers. Its tongue flicked out, painting the mesh with fresh numbers, 765. Holloway's crucifix swung wildly as he backpedaled. The medical team, their shadows. The Wendigo's breath synced with the pulsing red emergency lights. Inhale, 7, exhale, 6. Garza's laptop screen fractured into a dozen security feeds, each showing a different corridor of Facility X12. Shadows moved where shadows shouldn't, limbs stretching too long, spines arching under scrubs like saplings under snow. Chen's boot slid in Rook's blood. They're copying it, her voice cracked. The pattern. The Wendigo's ribs hitched, and its pupil dilated until the black swallowed the room. Raslow's sidearm didn't waver, but his missing fingers twitched against the grip. The mesh under the countdown numbers began to corrode, ichor eating through silver like acid. Holloway's knife clattered against the cage. Welds are failing. The Wendigo's breath hitched, 4, as the emergency lights stuttered overhead. Garza's laptop screen flashed a live feed of the medical team's shadows detaching from their bodies, elongating into spindled silhouettes that crawled along the ceiling. Chen's fingers dug into Garza's shoulder, her voice barely audible over the facility's rising alarm. It's not just copying, it's teaching them. Raslow's sidearm didn't waver, but his missing fingers flexed against the grip, phantom pain or phantom memory, Becca couldn't tell. The Wendigo's tongue flicked out, etching 3 into the corroded mesh. The countdown pulsed black, ichor sizzling through silver welds. Holloway lunged for the emergency panel, his crucifix swinging wildly. Seal the corridor. His fist slammed into the lockdown switch, once, twice. But the lights kept stuttering, the alarms warbling like a dying animal. The security feed showed the medical team's heads tilting in unison, their necks cracking with the same wet pop the Wendigo's jaw made. Chen's syringe trembled in her hand. They're sinking. Her breath fogged the air between them, like pack. The countdown hit 2, and the cage groaned. The Wendigo's breath synced with the pulsing emergency lights. Inhale, exhale, each cycle loosening another weld. Chen's syringe slipped from her fingers, clattering into Rook's drying blood as the security feeds flickered. Garza's laptop screen split again, left side showing the medical team's jaws unhinging in perfect unison, right side replaying Raslow's Arctic blade plunge at 00:03:47. The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, etching 1 into the mesh. The number sizzled deeper than the others, ichor eating through to bare steel. Holloway's knife flashed, not toward the cage but at the emergency conduit above it. Sparks rained down as he severed the UV light's power line. "By time," he rasped. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, tracking the falling sparks like they were part of some sacred ritual. Darkness swallowed the room except for Garza's laptop glow, and the thing on-screen wasn't medical staff anymore. Their scrubs hung in tatters, revealing jagged spines splitting through skin. One turned its head, too far, too fast, and Becca saw its eyes weren't eyes anymore, but pupils, vertical slits swallowing the fluorescence whole. The emergency lights died mid-pulse. Garza's laptop screen flickered, not from interference but from movement, as the medical team's elongated fingers slid into frame, their nails blackening into claws against the corridor's linoleum. The timestamp on the Arctic footage froze at 00:03:47 just as Raslow's younger self yanked the blade free. But this time, the ichor didn't drip. It spooled, stretching between blade and wound like taffy, forming a glistening bridge. Chen's breath fogged the dark. It's not memory, it's instructions. The Wendigo's ribs expanded with a wet crack, pressing the cage mesh outward. Silver filaments snapped one by one, ping, 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 like ice breaking underfoot. Holloway's knife hand trembled as the countdown on the mesh hit 0, the numeral dissolving into a black smear that ate through the steel bars. Garza's laptop screen went black, then in jagged white text, "Watch." Garza's laptop screen flickered back to life, not with glyphs or thermal images, but with a live feed from the facility's morgue. Rook's body jerked upright on the autopsy table, his severed jaw hanging by sinews as black ichor seeped from the stump. His remaining hand spasmed, fingers elongating into jointless talons that scratched at the stainless steel. Chen made a wet, choked sound. He wasn't bitten. The Wendigo's tongue flicked out, tasting her horror. Garza's screen refreshed, security footage of Rook's blood pooling under their boots moments ago. The crimson puddle twitched, forming tendrils that crawled toward the drain. The timestamp jumped, 00:03:46. Holloway's boot slammed down on one writhing strand. It split like mercury, reforming around his soul. "It's in the pipes," he rasped. His crucifix swung wildly as he backpedaled, the chain snapping against his collarbone. The emergency lights sputtered back on, casting the room in a sickly red glow. Rook's blood, no, not blood anymore, seethed against the floor, tendrils whipping toward Holloway's ankles like living tripwires. Chen stumbled back, her heel catching on Garza's overturned chair. The Wendigo's cage groaned, its mesh warping outward where the countdown numerals had dissolved into corrosive black holes. Garza's laptop screen flashed white too bright, then resolved into a split feed, left side showing Rook's reanimated corpse peeling off the morgue table, right side displaying Facility X12's plumbing schematics. Blueprints. The ichor tendrils weren't just crawling toward drains, they were following them, branching through pipes marked ventilation and Lab 3. Holloway's knife flashed silver as he severed a creeping tendril. It writhed on the floor, spasming into Algonquin syllabics that spelled too late before dissolving. The Wendigo's ribs expanded with a wet click, its pupil dilating to drink in Raslow's stillness. Garza's screen updated. Live footage from Lab 3's security cam. Chen's breath hitched as the feed showed her own workstation, her vials of sedatives, her notes on Wendigo tissue samples, and the ventilation grate above it bulging inward, black ichor oozing through the slats. Raslow's sidearm jerked toward the cage. "Garza, override the..." Garza's fingers flew over the keyboard, but the screen only refreshed with a single word in jagged glyphs. "No." The Wendigo's ribs expanded, a wet, satisfied sound, as Rook's reanimated corpse filled the morgue feed, his taloned fingers now scraping the security camera lens. Static bled into the image, warping his hollowed-out face into something that grinned with too many teeth. Chen's boot slipped in the seething ichor. "It's in the air vents." Her voice cracked as Lab 3's feed showed the bulging grate peeling open like an eyelid, black strands unfurling toward her abandoned syringe rack. Holloway's knife hand trembled. "Silver nitrate vials, top drawer," he didn't finish. The tendril around his ankle yanked, sending him crashing into the cage. The impact knocked his crucifix loose. It skittered across the floor, landing in Rook's twitching blood puddle. The chain dissolved instantly. The Wendigo's pupil contracted, tracking the crucifix's descent. Garza's screen updated. Live footage of the medical team, no, not team anymore, crawling through the corridors on all fours, their spines arched like startled cats. One turned its head, too far, and Becca saw its jaw unhinge, tongue lolling out to lick a security camera with blackened papillae. The crucifix sank into Rook's seething blood, its silver chain dissolving with a hiss like snow hitting a forge. The Wendigo's tongue flicked out, not toward the lost relic but toward Raslow's missing fingers, mirroring their tremble. Garza's laptop screen refreshed. Lab 3's ventilation grate burst open in a black geyser, ichor splattering Chen's notes with Rook's dog tag number. SGT. Elias Holloway Jr. The timestamp glitched, 00:03:45. Chen lunged for the emergency cabinet, her fingers scrabbling at the biometric lock. Silver nitrate. Holloway's knife flashed, severing the tendril coiled around his calf. The severed strand writhed into Algonquin glyphs, skin, before Garza's screen overrode it with morgue footage. Rook's jawless face pressed against the camera, his tracheal stump vibrating with a sound too deep for human vocal cords. The timestamp stuttered. 00:03:44. Raslow's sidearm barked, 3 rounds into the Wendigo's cage. The creature didn't flinch. The bullets passed through its reforming flesh like smoke, embedding in the concrete wall behind it in a perfect triangle. Garza's screen updated, a thermal overlay of the bullet holes, their heat signatures resolving into the Arctic unit's insignia. The emergency lights flickered out, plunging the room into darkness except for the sickly glow of Garza's laptop. The screen refreshed. Lab 3's feed now showed Chen's silver nitrate vials rattling in their rack as black tendrils slithered across the countertop. One vial tipped over, rolling toward the edge. Chen's breath hitched. That's enough to sterilize a. The vial shattered. The screen whited out for a heartbeat before resolving into thermal imaging, a shockwave of freezing blue radiating through the pipes, ichor recoiling like a burned hand. The Wendigo's cage shrieked, its ribs contracting violently. Holloway didn't waste the reprieve. He lunged for the emergency cabinet, his knife hilt smashing the glass. Silver nitrate ampules glinted in the dark. He grabbed 2, tossing one to Chen. Pressurized injectors now. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, tracking the ampules. Garza's screen refreshed, a live feed of the corridor outside. The medical team, not team anymore, froze mid-crawl, their elongated necks twisting toward Lab 3's door. One opened its mouth, too wide, and the sound that came out wasn't human. It was the same wet click hiss as the Arctic calm static. The emergency lights sputtered back on dim, flickering, just as Chen caught the ampule midair. Her fingers trembled as she slotted it into the injector. The Wendigo's cage groaned, its mesh warping outward where the silver had corroded. Black ichor dripped from the gaps, hitting the floor with a sound like fat sizzling on a griddle. Garza's laptop screen refreshed, too fast, showing Lab 3's door buckling inward. The medical team's elongated fingers curled around the frame, their nails splintering the reinforced steel. Chen's injector hissed, pressurized silver nitrate glinting in the sickly light. "Direct contact only," she whispered. "It's replicating too fast for." The Wendigo's ribs hitched, a wet, clicking metronome, as the corridor feed cut to static. Then, with a screech of tortured metal, Lab 3's door split down the middle. The thing that crawled through wasn't human anymore. Its spine arched like a question mark, vertebrae pressing against scrubs stretched too thin. Its jaw unhinged with a pop, tongue lolling out to taste the air, black, forked, and glistening with the same ichor eating through the cage. Holloway didn't hesitate. He lunged, injector flashing. The creature hissed, a sound like steam escaping a pipe, as silver nitrate bloomed under its clavicle. Its skin bubbled, peeling back to reveal jagged antler nubs pushing through muscle. Chen's breath hitched. "It's accelerating the change." The Wendigo's cage buckled with a metallic scream, its ribs pressing through the mesh like splintered piano wires. Garza's laptop screen fractured into a dozen feeds, Lab 3's intruder convulsing as silver veins spiderwebbed under its skin, morgue footage of Rook's corpse dragging itself off the autopsy table, security cams showing black ichor geysering from vents in the mess hall. The timestamp stuttered, 00:03:43. Chen's injector hissed again, this time aimed at the writhing tendrils around Holloway's boots. The ichor screamed, recoiling into the drains with a sound like bacon hitting a hot pan. Holloway didn't waste the opening. He slammed his ampule into the emergency sprinkler panel, glass shattering as silver nitrate mist hissed through the pipes overhead. The Wendigo's pupil contracted, *2 fast *, its breath sinking with the sprinkler's rhythmic hiss hiss hiss. Garza's screen updated. Thermal imaging showed the mist clinging to the medical team's warped silhouettes, their heat signatures dimming as frost crackled across their distended limbs. One turned its head wrong direction, and Becca saw its eyeballs burst from thermal shock, vitreous humor freezing mid-drip. Raslow's sidearm barked again, not at the cage, but at the corridor's access panel. Sparks flew as the bullets severed the hydraulic lines, the blast door slamming down just as another elongated figure lunged through. Metal met flesh with a wet crunch. Half a torso thudded to the floor, ichor spurting in rhythmic pulses that matched the Wendigo's labored breathing. The severed torso spasmed, fingers clawing at the blast door's seam. Black ichor pulsed from its stump in time with the Wendigo's wet, clicking breaths. Chen's injector trembled, half empty now, as she backed toward Garza's flickering laptop. The screen showed the medical team's frozen corpses twitching, their frost-cracked skin splitting to reveal jagged bone spurs. Holloway's boot crunched on a silver nitrate ampule. Vents are still open. His crucifix swung wildly as he jerked his chin upward, where the ceiling ducts bulged unnaturally, metal groaning under some unseen pressure. Garza's laptop refreshed, a schematic of Facility X12's ventilation system, red dots blooming like infections at every junction. The Wendigo's ribs expanded, its tongue flicking out to taste the panic. Chen's voice was too calm. "It's hurting us." The blast door shuddered. Something heavy thudded against it from the other side, once, twice, before the steel buckled inward with a scream. Raslow's sidearm barked 3 times into the dented metal. No blood seeped through, just silence. Then, click-click-hiss, the same Arctic calm static from Garza's speakers. The static dissolved into a sound like wind through frozen branches. No, not wind. Breathing. Raslow's missing fingers twitched against his sidearm as Garza's laptop screen glitched, showing the blast door's thermal overlay. Beyond the dented steel, 4 heat signatures crouched in perfect stillness, their spines arched like drawn bows. Chen's injector hissed, silver nitrate dripping onto her boots. "They're waiting for." The Wendigo's cage screamed, its mesh splitting down the middle. Ichor geysered as the creature's ribs unfolded like a broken umbrella, antler tips punching through the ceiling. Garza's laptop refreshed, a live feed of the ventilation shafts, black tendrils pulsing in sync with the Wendigo's wet, clicking breaths. Holloway lunged, slamming his last ampule into the ductwork. Frost spiderwebbed outward, but the tendrils didn't recoil. They throbbed, absorbing the silver mist like nutrients. The emergency lights stuttered, once, twice, before failing completely. Only Garza's laptop cast a sickly glow, its screen now split between the Wendigo's pupil and the ventilation schematic, red dots pulsing like a dying heartbeat. Chen's fingers tightened around her empty injector as the blast door groaned under another impact. This time, the dent fissured with a sound like ice cracking underfoot. Raslow's missing fingers twitched against his sidearm grip. "Garza, extraction protocol." His voice didn't waver, but Becca saw the tremor in his wrist, the same slight shake as when Arctic winds had chewed through their parkas 20 years ago. Garza's keyboard clattered. The screen flickered, access DENIAD, before resolving into a live feed from Facility X12's roof. Keller's modified helicopter sat untouched, its reinforced cages gleaming under emergency floods. The timestamp glitched, 00:03:42. Holloway's knife flashed as he severed a creeping tendril. There in the stairwells. His crucifix swung wildly, chain broken now, as he nodded toward the schematics. The red dots had converged into a noose around their level. The blast door's fissure split wider with a sound like a ribcage giving way. Chen's empty injector clattered to the floor as she backpedaled, her heel catching on Rook's half-dissolved dog tags. The Wendigo's cage buckled violently, ichor spraying in arcs that sizzled against Garza's laptop keyboard. The keys melted under each drop, forming Algonquin glyphs for hunger. Holloway grabbed Chen's elbow, yanking her behind the overturned exam table. Silver's just pissing it off now. His breath fogged in the sudden cold as frost crackled up the walls. The ventilation ducts bulged, metal seemed screaming. Garza's laptop screen refreshed, a thermal overlay of the stairwell. 4 heat signatures crouched motionless on the landing below, their spines arched at identical angles. The timestamp stuttered, 000341. Then the feed cut to Keller's helicopter again, this time with a new window open beside it, a security feed from the pilot's cabin. Keller's whiskey bottle lay shattered on the controls, his crucifix dangling from the altimeter. Empty seat. The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, etching 40 into the cage mesh. The numeral burned deeper than the others, ichor eating through to the concrete floor below. Raslow's sidearm clicked empty. He didn't blink as the blast door's dent fissured wider, revealing elongated fingers curling through the gap. The fingers through the blast door weren't fingers anymore, just lengths of jointless bone sheathed in black membrane, twitching like spider legs testing a web. Chen's breath hitched as one tapped against the steel in perfect sync with the Wendigo's clicking ribs. Garza's laptop screen refreshed. Keller's helicopter feed glitched, replaced by Arctic footage. Raslow's younger self standing over a twitching soldier, his silver blade buried to the hilt in the man's sternum. The timestamp froze at 000340, then rewound 2 seconds. Played again. Rewound. A looped confession. Holloway's knife flashed, severing a creeping tendril near his boot. The severed strand writhed into Algonquin glyphs, almost before dissolving. The Wendigo's pupil dilated, tracking the falling droplets of ichor as they hit the floor and sprouted, forming tiny antlered shapes that skittered toward Chen's ankles. Raslow didn't flinch as the blast door's fissure widened with a sound like ice calving. His empty sidearm stayed trained on the gap. Garza, override code Sierra Tango 9er. Garza's fingers flew over the melted keyboard, each keystroke accompanied by the wet click of ichor hardening between keys. The screen flickered, override accepted, before cutting to a live feed of Facility X-12's sublevel blast doors slamming shut in sequence. The Wendigo's ribs hitched, its breath sinking with the distant clangs like a drum roll counting down. Chen's boot crushed a skittering antler shape. It burst with a sound like a popped blister. "Override won't hold," she whispered. Her breath fogged the air as frost crept up her sleeves. "It's in the circuits." The blast door's fissure split wider inch by inch, revealing the thing crouched behind it. Not medical staff, not human. Its spine arched like a drawn bow, ribs pressing against scrubs stretched translucent. Holloway's knife flashed, embedding in its clavicle with a thunk. No blood, just the sound of ice cracking as silver veins spiderwebbed under its skin. Garza's laptop screen refreshed, a schematic of the facility's power grid, red dots blooming at every junction. The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, etching 39 into the cage mesh. The numeral burned through steel, ichor dripping onto live wiring below. Sparks geysered as the emergency lights died mid-pulse. The darkness smelled like wet copper and burnt plastic. Becca's fingers found Holloway's sleeve in the black, his arm rigid, tendons like steel cables under his skin. Garza's laptop screen flickered back to life, casting a jaundiced glow over the ruin of the cage. The Wendigo wasn't inside anymore, just a puddle of black ichor slowly reforming into something with too many joints. Chen's voice came from the floor, too calm. "It's in the wiring." She held up her forearm. The veins stood out black under her skin, branching like frost on a window. Garza's screen refreshed, facility schematics overwritten with Algonquin glyphs scrolling too fast to follow. The timestamp stuttered 000339 as the blast door's fissure split wide enough for a hand to slide through. Not a hand, a talon, sheathed in something that glistened like oil on water. Raslow moved first. He grabbed Chen's silver nitrate injector from the floor and lunged, not at the door, but at Garza's laptop. The needle plunged into the screen with a hiss. The glyphs dissolved into white noise as silver veins spiderwebbed across the display. Garza's laptop screen convulsed, the silver nitrate veins branching like lightning through the corrupted feed. The timestamp stuttered, 0003. 38 before the display shattered outward in a spray of glass and black ichor. Raslo reeled back, the injector still protruding from the ruined machine, its plunger depressed to the hilt. The Wendigo's cage stood empty, its mesh glistening with the same oily residue as the blast door's fissure. Holloway's knife trembled in his grip, its blade frosted over where it had severed the last tendril. Chen's breath came in shallow hitches, her forearm veins pulsing black under the flickering emergency lights. A wet click echoed from the ventilation ducts, not from the ruined laptop but from inside the walls. The sound repeated, synchronized with Chen's shuddering exhales. Becca's hand found Holloway's sleeve again, her fingers brushing the broken chain of his crucifix. "It's sinking with her," she whispered. The blast door's fissure split wider with a sound like a zipper parting flesh. The talon withdrew, replaced by a face, or what had been a face. Rook's jawless skull pressed against the gap, his tracheal stump vibrating with that same wet click hiss. His eye sockets were empty, but something moved behind them, shifting like oil in a glass. Rook's skull split down the middle, not from force, but like overripe fruit yielding to its own weight. Black ichor welled in the fissure, forming sinews that lashed outward and hooked into the blast door's steel. The metal groaned as the tendrils pulled, peeling the door open like a tin can. Holloway's boot crushed Chen's discarded injector. "Backblast," he barked, shoving Becca toward the emergency stairwell. She didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the thing unfurling behind Rook's shattered skull, a glistening mass of jointless limbs woven through with strands of Arctic unit insignia patches, their embroidery frozen in perfect preservation. Garza's ruined laptop sparked once, a final convulsion, before the screen flickered back to life. Not with schematics or glyphs, but with a single line of text scrolling across the static. "You are the door." Chen's breath hitched. Her black-veined hand clutched at her chest as if trying to claw out the synchronization. The click hiss in the vents sped up, matching her elevated pulse. Raslo's missing fingers twitched, not in phantom pain, but in recognition. Becca saw it then. The way the Wendigo's spilled ichor wasn't just pooling. It was arranging itself into the exact formation of Raslo's Arctic unit insignia, frozen mid-salute. The emergency stairwell door burst open before Becca could reach it, not outward, but inward, like something had sucked the air from the other side. Cold rushed in, carrying the scent of antiseptic and something older, muskier, like wet fur left to rot. Holloway's knife flashed, embedding in the throat of the figure that lurched through, a medic whose scrubs had fused to his distended spine, his jaw unhinged to reveal a blackened tongue vibrating with that same click hiss. The blade didn't stop him. The medic, not a medic anymore, stepped forward, impaling himself further on the silver, his fingers curling around Holloway's wrist with a sound like ice cracking. Chen's breath hitched. "They're learning," she whispered, her black-veined hand clutching at her own throat as if mirroring the wound. Garza's shattered laptop screen flickered one last time, the words "You are the door" dissolving into a live feed of Facility X-12 sublevel morgue. Rook's eviscerated torso dragged itself across the tiles, his remaining arm now terminating in a cluster of jointless talons that scratched against the steel drawers. The timestamp glitched 00:03:37 before cutting to the roof feed again. Keller's helicopter rotors twitched, then spun to life without a pilot. The Wendigo's spilled ichor pulsed, its surface tension breaking as tiny antlered shapes skittered toward Chen's boots. Raslo moved first, his boot stomping down hard, but the shapes flowed around it, reforming into Algonquin glyphs for soon. Holloway wrenched his knife free, the medic's throat gaping like a second mouth as he collapsed, his limbs spasming in perfect sync with the click hiss from the vents. The emergency lights died completely. Only the dying laptop's glow remained, painting the room in jaundiced strobes as Rook's skull fully split, ichor tendrils suspending the halves like theater curtains. Behind it, the Wendigo unfolded, not the caged creature they'd captured, but something wider, its ribs branching into antlers that scraped both walls and ceiling simultaneously. Chen's choking gasp synchronized with its wet inhalations. Holloway's knife hand shook, backs to the Wendigo's tongue lashed out, not toward them but toward Raslow's missing fingers. The stump twitched, and for a heartbeat Becca saw it. The silver tether from Arctic footage, pulsing between Raslow's hand and the Wendigo's teeth like umbilical cord. Garza's laptop screen exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging them into blackness lit only by the thing's pupil, a pinprick of refracted light, like ice under moonlight. Chen collapsed, her veins fully black now, fingers clawing at her sternum where the skin tented upward. Holloway grabbed her collar, dragging her backward as the medic's corpse twitched, not dead, but rewiring, its spine arching to press frost-bitten fingertips against the floor in perfect mimicry of the Wendigo's posture. The Wendigo's tongue lashed out, not to strike but to connect, the blackened tip brushing Raslow's missing fingers with the familiarity of a lover's touch. The stump spasmed, ichor welling in the old wound like ink from a pen. Becca understood then. Raslow wasn't just the architect. He was the anchor. Holloway's knife flashed, not at the creature but at Raslow's throat. The blade stopped a hair's breadth from skin, frost crackling along the steel. "Undo it," he growled. Raslow didn't blink. His remaining fingers twitched in a pattern Becca recognized from Arctic unit hand signals. Detonate primary charge. Garza's corpse jerked upright, his shattered laptop screen flaring to life one last time. The words "your signal" pulsed in time with the Wendigo's breathing. Chen's black-veined hand shot out, seizing Raslow's wrist with unnatural strength. Her voice came out layered, hers and theirs. "You don't get to die twice." The emergency lights exploded in a shower of sparks as the Wendigo unfolded fully, its antlers piercing concrete like roots through permafrost. Becca lunged for Holloway's silver nitrate injector, still embedded in the laptop, and drove it into Raslow's chest with the force of a bayonet thrust. The plunger depressed with a hiss. Silence. Then, a sound like glaciers calving. Raslow's mouth opened in a silent scream as silver veins spiderwebbed under his skin, branching toward his missing fingers where the tether pulsed black. The Wendigo shrieked, its antlers retracting like snapped piano wires. Chen collapsed, her veins clearing as the click hiss in the vents stuttered out. Garza's screen refreshed, detonation sequence initiated just as the floor trembled. Facility X-12's self-destruct, buried deep in Cheyenne Mountain, awoke with a groan of shearing metal. Holloway grabbed Chen's arm. "Move." They sprinted for the emergency stairwell as ceiling panels rained down behind them. The Wendigo thrashed, ichor spraying in arcs that froze midair. Raslow's silver-laced blood acting as anchor, pinning it in place like a butterfly on corkboard. Becca didn't follow. She crouched beside Raslow, watching his lips form words without sound. "It wasn't supposed to be you." His remaining fingers twitched, not Arctic signals now, but the clumsy signing of a man who'd spent 20 years forgetting his own guilt. The Wendigo mirrored the movement, its talons flexing in perfect sync. Garza's laptop screen pulsed red 000030 as Becca pried the injector from Raslow's chest. Frost crackled up her sleeves when she plunged it into the Wendigo's pupil. The creature didn't resist. Its ribs hitched once, a wet, almost human sigh before collapsing inward like a deflated lung. The stairwell door burst open, Holloway's silhouette backlit by emergency floods. "Valentine, now," she turned just as the blast wave hit. Concrete shattered, the world inverted, then blackness. Becca woke to sunlight slicing through hospital blinds. Her ribs ached where the restraints pressed too tight. The monitors beeped in time with her pulse, too steady for someone who'd seen what she'd seen. Keller stood at the foot of the bed, his flight jacket stinking of whiskey and disinfectant. "Facility's a glass crater," he said, tossing her a dog tag. "Rooks. Only thing they found intact." She let the metal dig into her palm, the silence stretched. Keller finally cleared his throat. "They're calling it a reactor meltdown." His crucifix swung as he leaned in. But the Arctic unit files, all redacted, Raslow's service record, never existed. The heart monitor spiked when she saw it, the shadow pooling under Keller's collar. Not a bruise, black veins. Chen's voice came from the doorway, crisp as a med school lecture. Temporal lobe activity suggests memory retention. Her scrubs hid the track marks from silver nitrate IVs, but not the way her pupils contracted in sunlight. Holloway leaned against the wall behind her, his knife hand twitching whenever the PA system crackled. Becca's fingers found the bedside button not for the nurse, for the gun taped under the rail. Keller's smile didn't reach his eyes. Garza's last transmission got through. You know what it said? The shadows under his nails spread like ink in water. Protocol's not containment, it's cultivation. The heart monitor flatlined when she pulled the trigger. Keller's head snapped back, not from the bullet, but from the silver shrapnel embedded in the round. His jaw unhinged with a wet pop, ichor spraying across the cardiac arrest poster. Chen didn't flinch as black tendrils erupted from his nostrils. Secondary exposure takes 72 hours to manifest, she said, rolling up her sleeve. The veins pulsed darker. You've got till midnight. Holloway's knife flashed, severing the restraints. Choppers on the roof. His crucifix dangled from the blade, melted silver reforged into a crude syringe. This time we burn it all. The Arctic wind howled through the helicopter's open bay door, carrying the stench of charred flesh from Facility X-12 smoking ruins below. Chen's medkit rattled with ampules of liquid silver, each labeled with a team member's name. Becca counted the vials. One missing. Rooks, she shouted over the rotors. Holloway tossed her a dog tag, not Rooks, Raslow's. The metal burned her palm where Garza's final transmission pulsed in Morse code, target the anchor. Chen's syringe plunged into her own forearm without hesitation. Silver bloomed under her skin like frost on glass. They're not erasing us, she said, her pupils contracting as the black veins dissolved. They're upgrading. Keller's corpse twitched in the pilot's seat, ichor leaking from his ear canals. The autopilot's screen flashed Algonquin glyphs, skinned the door before the chopper banked sharply north. Becca grabbed the overhead strap, her ribs screaming. The horizon tilted, revealing the true shape of the ice fields below. Not snow, but millions of silver filaments woven into the permafrost in perfect mimicry of Garza's circuitry. Holloway's knife scraped against his melted crucifix. Primary charge is still armed. His blade pointed downward through the floor, through the wreckage, through the mountain itself, to where Raslow's silver-laced corpse pulsed like a dying star in Facility X-12's core. The detonation sequence had never stopped counting. The timer on Becca's wrist read 000007. Chen's hand clamped over hers. Not a countdown. Her fingernails peeled back to reveal silver filaments knitting through flesh. A synchronization. The helicopter's control panel exploded in a shower of sparks. Keller's corpse lurched upright, his jaw detaching with a wet pop as black tendrils lashed toward the cyclic. Becca's boot connected with his temple, not to kill, but to steer, wrenching the chopper into a spiral that aligned with the ice field's central glyph. Holloway's knife found Keller's spine, severing the tendrils connecting him to the Arctic unit insignia branded on his neck. Chen's medkit spilled across the floor. The missing vial wasn't Rook's, it was hers. The label read Valentine in Garza's precise handwriting. Becca understood then, not sedatives. Anchors. The silver nitrate wasn't meant to kill the Wendigo. It was meant to tether it, to Raslow, to the facility, to every Arctic unit corpse frozen in the permafrost below. The chopper's shadow passed over the central glyph. For a heartbeat, Becca saw the truth of Garza's final transmission. The ice wasn't ice at all. It was skin, a membrane stretched taut over something vast and ancient, its veins pulsing with the same black ichor that had infected them all. The Wendigo wasn't the target. It was the scalpel. Holloway's crucifix dagger plunged into the floor, its melted silver spreading like mercury across the steel. Chen's fingers interlaced with Becca's, their shared grip tightening around the Valentine vial. On three, she breathed, her pupils contracting to pinpricks. The chopper's altimeter screamed. The ice rushed up to meet them. Somewhere below, Facility X-12's ruins breathed. 1. Keller's reanimated corpse spasmed against the controls, his spine arching to snap the cyclic in half. The chopper lurched, not crashing but aligning, its shattered windshield framing the glyph's center like a gun sight. 2. Chen's free hand ripped open her scrubs. The black veins weren't spreading anymore. They were converging, forming an exact replica of Raslow's Arctic unit insignia over her sternum. Holloway's knife hand twitched, not in hesitation, but in synchronization with the detonator countdown flashing on Becca's wrist. 000003. 3. The vials shattered in their clenched fists. Liquid silver burned through their gloves like holy water through demon flesh, but neither let go. The helicopter's shadow hit the glyph's center at the exact moment the silver made contact with their blood, and the world split. Not an explosion, an unfolding. Becca saw it all at once. Facility X-12's ruins peeling back like an autopsy incision, revealing the permafrost not as ice but as skin, stretched taut over something vast and pulsing. The Wendigo's cage hadn't contained it. The cage was it, ribs branching into antlers that pierced upward through the membrane like stitches through flesh. Raslow's corpse floated at the center, silver filaments radiating from his missing fingers to every Arctic unit grave beneath the ice. Garza's final transmission hadn't been a warning, it was a blueprint. Chen's grip tightened as their mingled blood hit the glyph. The silver didn't burn, it synchronized, threading through their veins in perfect mimicry of Raslow's tether. Holloway's knife flashed, severing Keller's spinal cord with surgical precision, but the tendrils didn't die. They bloomed, forming new tethers that lashed the chopper's wreckage to the membrane below. The altimeter shattered, the world inverted. Becca's ribs clicked as the pressure shifted, not breaking but rearranging the way Raslow's fingers had when he signed detonate primary charge. She understood now, the charge wasn't explosives, it was them. Holloway's crucifix dagger pulsed silver where it pierced the floor. The blade wasn't steel anymore, it was one of Garza's filaments, forged from the same material as Facility X-12's mirrors. "Skin the door," Chen gasped, her pupils contracting to pinpricks as black veins dissolved into liquid mercury. Becca didn't hesitate. Her free hand found the dagger's hilt. Together, they pulled. The membrane tore with a sound like Velcro parting from frozen meat. The Wendigo's shriek wasn't pain. It was recognition, the same wet click hiss as Arctic calm static. The creature unfurled fully now, no longer a thing of ribs and antlers but a pattern, its limbs branching into the exact formation of Garza's circuitry across the permafrost. Keller's corpse spasmed once, final neural feedback, before collapsing into the wreckage. His jaw detached completely, black tongue lolling against the cyclic in a perfect mimicry of Raslow's Arctic unit insignia. Holloway didn't waste a breath. His dagger flashed, severing the last tether connecting Keller's spine to the membrane. The body dropped like a marionette with cut strings. Chen's medkit spilled across the tilted floor. The Valentine vial wasn't empty. It was feeding, silver threads knitting through the cracks in the glass to meet their blood. Becca watched the filaments branch into fractal patterns identical to the ones she'd seen in Facility X-12's mirrors. Not anchors, she realized. Keys. The chopper's shadow hit the central glyph at the same moment the silver made contact with the membrane. The impact didn't crater the ice. It unzipped it, peeling back layers of permafrost to reveal the truth beneath. Not soil, not bedrock, but flesh, pulsing in time with the Wendigo's clicking breaths. Raslow's corpse floated at the center, his missing fingers branching into silver filaments that stitched the wound shut from beneath. Holloway's blade found the nearest tether. The cut should have severed it. Instead, the filament divided, each half recoiling to form new connections. one to Chen's exposed veins, the other to Becca's dagger hand. The synchronization wasn't infection, it was integration. The Wendigo's shriek shook the chopper's wreckage. Not pain, recognition. Its antlers weren't bone anymore. They were Garza's circuitry, branching through the ice in perfect replication of Facility X-12's blueprints. Becca's ribs clicked as the pressure changed, not breaking, but aligning, the way Raslow's fingers had when he signed the Arctic unit's last command. Chen's grip on the dagger tightened. Her veins weren't black now. They were mirrored, reflecting the glyph's pattern as it burned through her scrubs. "Skin the door," she repeated, but the phrase had shifted, no longer an order but a confirmation, the same way Raslow's detonate primary charge had been a plea. Becca didn't hesitate. Together they pulled. The membrane tore with a sound like a zipper through frozen meat. The wound didn't bleed. It displayed, peeling back to reveal the truth of Garza's final transmission. The Arctic wasn't a graveyard. It was an operating table. The Wendigo wasn't the patient. It was the scalpel, and every silver filament led back to Raslow's corpse, not as a corpse, but as a conduit, his missing fingers branching into the ice to suture something vast and ancient beneath. Holloway's crucifix dagger pulsed silver where it pierced the floor. His lips moved, not in prayer, but in synchronization with the countdown on Becca's wrist, 000001. The blade wasn't steel anymore. It was one of Garza's filaments, reforged into the same material as Facility X-12's mirrors. The reflection didn't show their faces. It showed the pattern, the exact replication of Garza's circuitry across the permafrost, the Wendigo's antlers branching through ice like stitches through flesh. The chopper's wreckage groaned as the membrane fully parted. The impact wasn't a crash. It was an alignment, the shattered windshield framing Raslow's floating corpse like a gun sight. Chen's free hand ripped open her scrubs, not in pain, but in offering, exposing the Arctic unit insignia that had bloomed over her sternum. The silver filaments in her veins thrummed, resonating with the ones in Becca's grip. The countdown hit 0. Not an explosion, a completion. Holloway's dagger plunged downward, not into flesh, but into the exact intersection where Raslow's missing fingers branched into the membrane. The blade didn't pierce. It merged, silver filaments knitting through the wound like sutures. Chen exhaled, a sound like radio-static clearing, as her veins lit up from within, tracing the same path as Garza's circuitry across the ice. The Wendigo's shriek cut off mid-breath. Its antlers unfurled, no longer bone but living wire, branching through the ruptured membrane in perfect replication of Facility X-12's blueprints. Becca watched the creature's ribs spread like a steel cage disassembling itself, not dying, but disseminating, each rib becoming a filament that stitched the tear in reality shut from beneath. Keller's corpse twitched once, final synaptic feedback before collapsing into the wreckage. His jaw detached with a wet pop, black tongue lolling against the cyclic in a perfect mimicry of Raslow's last hand sign. Detonate primary charge. The words weren't a command anymore. They were an epitaph. Chen's grip on the dagger loosened. Her veins weren't black now. They were clear, the silver having burned through every trace of ichor. Protocol wasn't containment, she whispered, her pupils reflecting the glyph's afterimage. It was transfusion. Holloway's crucifix dagger pulsed where it pierced the membrane. The blade wasn't steel anymore. It was one of Garza's filaments, reforged in Facility X-12's mirrors. The wound didn't bleed. It displayed, peeling back to reveal Raslow's corpse floating at the center, his missing fingers branching into the ice like roots. Not a corpse, a conduit. Becca's ribs clicked as the pressure equalized. The Arctic wind howled through the shattered windshield, carrying the scent of ozone and something older, wet stone, surgical steel. The chopper's wreckage groaned as the membrane sealed itself around them, silver threads knitting through the fuselage like sutures. Chen exhaled, a sound like radio-static clearing, and slumped against the bulkhead. Her scrubs hung open, revealing unmarked skin where the Arctic unit insignia had been. Holloway's knife hand twitched, not in pain but in recognition, as the last filament detached from his wrist. The silence was absolute. No calm static, no clicking ribs, just the wind and the creak of settling metal. Becca's fingers found Keller's dog tags first. The metal was warm, not with body heat but with residual current from Garza's filaments. She turned them over. Not Keller's, not Rook's, Raslow's. The stamped letters bled silver where the filaments had fused with steel. Chen's hand closed over hers. "Primary charge is still armed," she murmured, but her voice lacked urgency. The words weren't a warning anymore. They were an acknowledgement. Holloway's crucifix dagger lay between them, its melted silver branching across the floor in perfect mimicry of Garza's circuitry. Becca traced the pattern with her boot. Not random. Calculated. The same fractal spread she'd seen in Facility X-12's mirrors, the same branching paths that had stitched the Wendigo into the ice. The wreckage shuddered, not from impact, from integration. The fuselage wasn't steel anymore, it was translucent, filaments weaving through the alloy like veins in an insect's wing. Through it, Becca could see the truth of Garza's final transmission. The Arctic wasn't frozen. It was preserved. The ice wasn't water. It was formaldehyde. Holloway exhaled, a sound like static clearing, and pressed his palm flat against the membrane floor. His crucifix tattoo pulsed silver where it intersected Garza's filaments. "Protocol wasn't to kill it," he said. The words didn't surprise her. They fit, slotting into place like the last piece of a puzzle she'd been assembling since that first nightmare of antlers scraping bone. It was to reforge it. Chen's medkit lay open, its contents spilled and rearranged, not by the crash but by design. The Valentine vial wasn't empty. It was transformed, its glass now housing a miniature replica of Facility X-12's central chamber, complete with Raslow's suspended corpse at its heart. Becca understood then, not sedatives, scale models. The silver nitrate had never been meant to stop the Wendigo. It was meant to replicate it, smaller, controllable, theirs. Keller's corpse twitched, not with residual infection, but with resonance. His jaw detached completely, the blackened tongue lolling against the cyclic to form one final glyph. Complete. The chopper's wreckage groaned in response, its metal skeleton unfolding like origami in reverse, each panel aligning with the filament patterns beneath. Becca stood, not on the floor, through it. Her boots phased into the membrane as though stepping into a reflection. Chen followed without hesitation, her scrubs dissolving into the same mirrored filaments that had replaced her veins. Holloway's knife hand pulsed silver where it intersected the pattern, not losing the blade but extending it, the dagger's edge branching into new connections below. The Arctic wind died abruptly, replaced by the hum of filament networks sinking beneath their feet. Becca's boots sank into the membrane, not through ice, but into it, the way a surgeon's blade sinks into flesh with intent. Chen exhaled, her breath crystallizing not as frost, but as circuitry, silver tendrils branching in perfect replication of Garza's final schematics. The wreckage of Keller's helicopter wasn't debris anymore. It was integration, its metal skeleton unfolding into the larger pattern like a key turning in a lock. Holloway's crucifix dagger pulsed where it pierced the membrane. The blade had no end now, it branched infinitely downward, each filament splitting to stitch the Arctic's wounds shut from beneath. Becca watched the truth of Garza's design unfold. Facility X-12 hadn't been a containment site. It was a furnace, and Raslow's corpse the crucible. The Wendigo wasn't a prisoner. It was the alloy. Chen's hand found Becca's wrist. Her fingers passed through flesh like smoke, their substance diffusing into silver threads that spiraled toward the central glyph. "Primary charge cycling," she murmured, but the words vibrated at a frequency that resonated through the membrane. Becca understood protocol had never been about destruction. It was transmutation. The ichor in their veins wasn't infection. It was liquefied mirror, ready to be poured into Garza's waiting mold. The wreckage groaned as it completed its final alignment. Keller's jawless corpse spasmed, not in death throes but in synchronization, his blackened tongue lashing against the cyclic to etch one final glyph into the ice. Valentine. The membrane trembled, not with rupture, with recognition. Becca's ribs clicked as the pressure equalized, her sternum splitting open to reveal not bone, not blood, but the same fractal patterns that had stitched the Wendigo into existence. Holloway's blade flashed downward, not a strike but a sealing as the last filament connected. The Arctic didn't explode. It breathed, exhaling 20 years of frozen screams as the membrane solidified into perfect, silent glass. Somewhere beneath, Raslow's missing fingers twitched not in pain but in completion, as Facility X-12's mirrors finally showed the Wendigo what it truly was, not a monster, a mosaic, and the final piece had always been them. Chen exhaled, a sound like radiostatic clearing as her veins dissolved into pure light. The glyph pulsed once, twice, then held, its silver lines branching through the ice in permanent replication of Garza's design. Holloway's crucifix dagger melted into the pattern, its steel reforged into the filaments that would keep the Arctic sutured shut. Becca's fingers brushed Keller's dog tags one last time. The metal wasn't warm anymore. It was perfect. Cold. Smooth. Complete. The wind died. The ice held. And in the silence between heartbeats, Facility X-12's final transmission played on an endless loop, not through speakers, but through the filaments now woven into the fabric of the world itself. Protocol active. Pattern stable. Wendigo contained. 3 sentences. 39 letters. The exact number of stitches required to close a wound that had been bleeding since the first antler scraped bone. Becca closed her eyes. Not to sleep. To see. The nightmare of antlers was gone now, replaced by something vast and quiet, a reflection of Garza's circuitry branching through time instead of ice, each filament a silver thread in a tapestry still being woven. Chen's hand found hers. Holloway's breath synced with the pulse of the glyph beneath them, and somewhere beneath the permafrost, Raslow's missing fingers twitched, not in guilt, but in rhythm, as the Wendigo's shriek faded into the hum of a furnace finally at rest. The chopper's wreckage settled, not collapsing but converging, its metal skeleton dissolving into the membrane like ink in water. Becca didn't resist as the filaments threaded through her ribs, aligning her bones with the pattern beneath. This wasn't death. It was dissolution. The final step of Wendigo Protocol, to become the mirror that would reflect the creature back into itself forever. She smiled as the ice embraced her, her last thought not of fear, but of recognition, the same way Raslow's fingers had when they signed Detonate Primary Charge and finally understood what it meant to come home. Above them the Arctic sky darkened, not with storm clouds but with the slow, inevitable spread of silver filaments branching through the atmosphere like veins in an insect's wing. The wind returned, whispering through the ice in a language older than Algonquin glyphs. You were never the door. You were the key. And then silence. Absolute, perfect, complete. 10 years later, a researcher at McMurdo Station would find a single dog tag embedded in a newly formed ice core. The stamped letters would read Valentine, but the metal would be wrong, too light, too smooth, branching into fractal patterns under the microscope. The report would be buried. The sample would vanish. And in the silence between heartbeats, the ice would breathe. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, please leave a like and subscribe.